All right, well, we will begin. This is our planning committee meeting for Thursday, August 25th, 2022. We acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe, dont la culture et la présence ont enrichi et continuent d'enrichir ces terres. Kelly, our committee coordinator. Kelly, can you do a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councillor Brockington.
Good morning.
Councillor Cluche.
Présent.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Chair Moffat.
Here.
And Chair Gower.
Here. Thank you, Kelly. So this is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 4.1, 4.2, and 5.2 to 5.12 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on August 31st, 2022, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none, thank you. Confirmation of minutes, we have 2 minutes to confirm. The first is the Planning Committee and Community Protective Services Committee, the joint meeting from June 16th, 2022. Are the minutes confirmed?
Confirmed.
Thank you. And Planning Committee meeting minutes, meeting number 67, July 7th, 2022. Are those minutes confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmed.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go through the agenda now in a consent agenda. Any item where we have delegations or where members wish to hold the item for comments or questions, we'll hold and come back to them later. The first 2 items on the agenda are deferrals from the last meeting, and we will be holding both of them. 4.1 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 142, 144, and 148 Nepean Street, demolition control for 142 Nepean Street. So we will hold that because we have delegations. And 4.2 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 100 Stacy Drive in Canada North. We will hold this one as well. So moving through, we have item 5.1, the 2021 annual development report. Now, staff have a presentation ready, but if we can carry this on consent, we are able to do that. Does anyone wish to hold this item for discussion?
Chair, I just have a question about how we're doing on intensification, meeting our goals of the OP. That's the only thing I'd like to hear from staff on, where we are with in comparison to our OP goals in the last year.
And Chair, I was also interested in hearing about the population estimate tracking.
All right, yeah, so we can hold this one. So 5.1 will hold. 5.2 is an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 1330, 1344, 1346 Bank Street and 2211 Riverside Drive. Now there is a motion from Councillor Menard, but I think that's still being refined. So we can hold this and perhaps the moment that we know it is ready to go, we could come back to that. We don't necessarily have to hold this until after some of the other items, but for now, unless Councillor Menard, is this the motion still being worked on?
I think it's all set. Caitlin won't be able to say, but I believe it is.
We are just circulating it now, but it is final as I understand.
Okay, well, let's hold it. We can come back to it just to make sure we get all the I's dotted, T's crossed. 5.3, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 525 Leggett Drive and 359 Terry Fox Drive in Canada North. There are no public delegations. We do have the applicants here. Does anyone on committee wish to hold this item? So for the applicants that are here, I'm not sure if they're in our room. Oh, there's James Island from Novatech. If the committee is ready to carry this item on consent, do you wish to speak to it today?
No, we don't need to, if that's the case.
All right. You're very quiet, but I did hear you don't need to speak to it. Councillor Curry, any quick comments or?
No, I think that we've done lots of consultation already and the community's happy with it. So we could pass this right away.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So on item number 5.3, are the report recommendations carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Okay, 5.4, also in Canada North, an official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for 570 and 600 March Road. There are no public delegations. There is a technical motion. Why don't we introduce that technical motion first off? I think Councillor Moffat, you get to read it once we have it on screen.
Yes, whereas the French translation of recommendation 2 for report ACS 2022 PIE EDP 0022, there's lots of zeros and twos, did not match the English recommendation. And whereas it is the intent of the report for the English staff recommendations be presented to committee, therefore be it resolved that with respect to this report, Planning Committee amend the French recommendation 2 to be the following. 2. Que le Comité de l'urbanisme recommande au Conseil d'approuver la modification du règlement de zonage visant les... I'm not going to do this whole thing. It's on your screen in French. I always jumble the numbers is my problem. It's the numbers. I don't speak French enough. I really should fix that. Therefore, be it further resolved that no further notice be, or sorry, that there be no further notice pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act.
Merci, Scott. Since we have no delegations, are there any requests to hold this item? And we do have a representative from the applicant here, Aaron Claude. If the committee is prepared to carry this on consent, does the applicant wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. No, there's no delegations. We are okay with proceeding with the approval.
Okay, thank you. So on the technical amendment, is that motion carried?
Carried.
Okay, and the report recommendations as amended, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Okay, item number 5.5, still in Canada North, zoning bylaw amendment for 1050 Canadian Shield Avenue. We have no delegations, no motions that I'm aware of. Any requests from the committee to hold this item? Okay, we do have representatives from the applicant here, from Lipine and from Novatech. If the committee is ready to carry this item on consent, do the applicants wish to speak on it?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Kayla Blakely with Novatech, and no, we do not wish to speak on this item, given there's no delegations, and we're supportive of staff's recommendation that's before you.
Okay, thank you, Kayla, and merci, Pascal. So on the report recommendations for 1050 Canadian Shield Avenue, are they carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried, thank you. And 5.6 is a zoning bylaw amendment just a little bit north in West Carleton March, 1053, 1075, and 1145 March Road. There are no public delegations registered. Are there any requests to hold this item from the committee? Seeing none, we have applicants, representatives of the applicant here. If the committee is prepared to carry this item, do you wish to speak on it? Hi, Robert.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
If we're prepared to carry this on consent, do you need to speak on the item?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So on the recommendations for item 5.6, are they carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Okay, item 5.7 is a application for demolition and new construction at 229, 231, 241, 245, and 247 Beechwood Avenue, properties designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act in Rideau Rockcliffe. We do have a speaker registered for this, so we'll hold this item. And that takes us to item 5.8, also in Rideau Rockcliffe, a zoning bylaw amendment for 212 and 214 Donald Street. There are no delegations. I'm not aware of any motions on it either. Any requests from our committee to hold this item? Okay, and we have Rosaline Hill representing the applicant. Not sure if she's in the panelist room yet. Hi, Rosaline. If the committee is prepared to carry this on consent, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on the report recommendations for item 5.8, are they carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 5.9 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 280 Laurier Avenue East in Rideau Vanier. There are no delegations. There is a motion. Councillor Fleury's motion. Do you have a mover on this from the committee, Councillor Fleury?
Leave Co-Chair Moffat.
Okay.
This is correct.
Well, if you want to introduce it or read it for us, Councillor Fleury, and Co-Chair Moffat will be formally the mover.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning, everyone. Whereas the Sandy Hill has seen 9 zoning reports since 2010 to ensure the protection of character of the neighborhood, which include 8 heritage conservation districts. Whereas Laurier East is part of the Prime Minister's Row Initiative. Whereas Ward 12 has the most calls for service to bylaw with more than 2,600 calls in the first quarter of 2022, representing the highest number of calls in the city with the citywide average of just over 1,211 calls. Whereas each bylaw and regulatory services visits to a property cost taxpayer $300, whereas one of the areas driving the increase in City of Ottawa bylaw and regulatory services calls relates to garbage management and storage, with more than 1,100 calls to bylaw for Ward 12 in the second quarter of 2022, whereas the current Sandy Hill special site control area requires new units of more than 4 units to include waste storage inside the main building, providing enclosure to the storage of garbage and other waste materials indoors, which is this bylaw referred to here. Whereas 280 Laurier East building historically mismanaged garbage outdoors, and there's an opportunity to provide storage within the apartment complex, and constant debris and increase in the rat population of this property has had negative impacts. Whereas this proposed side yard waste storage, which would face Sweetland Avenue, a designated heritage conservation district area, and will negatively impact the HCD and its immediate neighbor at 17 Sweetland, which is a heritage designated building with heritage characteristics, including windows, porch, and front yard, and quality of life of this neighboring property. Whereas the concerns raised by the community and reflected in statistical evidence will be entirely mitigated through waste storage indoors in the principal building, which improves neighborhood quality of life and reduces cost onto the City of Ottawa. Therefore, be it resolved that report in front of us recommends the zoning details in document 2 be replaced with the revised document 2 for council approval. Be it further resolved that no further notice be given pursuant to the Planning Act subsection 3417.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. And I think that's been circulated to the committee, but if not, we'll get that circulated. We'll hold this item. It's a bit more of a complex motion. It's not a technical motion. So we'll hold item 5.9. And 5.10, also in Rideau Vanier, zoning bylaw amendment for 360 Friel Street. We have no delegations. There is a, Councillor Fleury, you have a direction on this one, I think.
I do, and thank you, Chair and Tim Mark. I know we're in the Bill 109 era. So, so the first direction on future site plan was a bit of a tricky environment. So I want to thank legal staff for working with me on this. To ensure that this development at 360 Freel integrates into the neighborhood correctly, specific site plan elements should be considered. Planning Committee requests the Director of Planning Services to consider in the further discussions on 360 Freel site plan the following elements: fencing and gates to protect future tenant privacy and security, exterior materials to align with neighborhood character, permanent at-grade amenity space to provide one permanent barbecue and picnic table for all tenants to use, and then a car sharing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I do just want to do a quick check if Mr. Mark or someone from the legal staff is online, because we no longer have councillor concurrence on site plans. So the procedure or the way that committee can deal with motions and directions on site plan will be a little different going forward. Mr. Mark, do you have any concerns with the direction as it's worded?
No, I indeed, as Councillor Fleury said, I worked with him to come up with language that respects the revisions to the Planning Act and Bill 109, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And does staff accept that as direction?
Morning, Mr. Chair. Yes, we accept that as direction, and we'll work on considering those items during site plan.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So with no delegations, and I don't think we have any requests to hold this item, if the applicant's here, if we're prepared to carry this on consent, do you wish to speak today on the item?
Yes, I do.
You would like to speak on it? Is it a quick comment, Harris, or otherwise we may have to hold it for the end?
No, I can. I don't wish to speak on this thing.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. All right then, so we have the direction, and then so item 5.10, are the report recommendations carried?
Carried.
Carried. Okay, thanks everyone. 5.11 is in College Ward. It's a zoning bylaw amendment for 3 Bassano Street. There are no delegations registered, and I'm not aware of any motions. Do any committee members wish to hold this? Councillor Shirelli, you wish to hold this item?
No, I just want to make a comment, so I can do it quickly, or?
A quick comment now is fine, yes.
Okay, we held an extensive public consultation where we had over 100 people make comments, and the majority of people see this as one of the few types of intensification that the community welcomes, and hopes that the committee will recognize that they're willing to accept some types of intensification, and this is one of the types.
Okay, thank you. The applicants are here. I see Peter Hume and Lisa De La Rosa. If the committee's prepared to carry this on consent, do you wish to speak at all?
No, Mr. Chairman, if you're prepared to carry this on consent, we'll take yes for an answer.
Okay, thank you. So on the report recommendations for 5.11, are they carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we're making it through here. Item number 5.12 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 1058, 1062, and 1066 in River Ward. There are no delegations registered. Are there any requests from the committee to hold this item? Not at this time. Okay, we do have representatives from the applicant here. There's Ryan Polton from Novatech. Ryan, if the committee is prepared to carry this on consent, do you wish to speak to the item?
No, I do not wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. So are the report recommendations for item 5.12 carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Okay, 5.13, community benefits charge strategy and bylaw. We do have delegations registered, so we'll hold this one. I know Councillor Fleury has motions, so we'll come back to that when we get to the item. And item 5.14 is a development charge complaint for 1354 and 1376 Carling Avenue in River Ward. Chair Moffat has a motion to defer.
Therefore, be it resolved that item 5.14 of Planning Committee's Agenda 68 be deferred to the September 8th Planning Committee meeting.
Thank you. On the deferral motion, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried. And item 6.1, status update, Planning Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending August 19th. Is that update received?
Received.
Received. Thank you. Okay, I just want to go back to 5.2. We were waiting on a final check of the motion. Kelly, do you know if that's ready to go? That's the Bank Street, the MOU motion. Councillor Menard, if you can read that in for us.
Sure. Thanks so much, Chair, and just appreciate staff's work on this and the applicants work with us in our office as well as communities work. I'll read it in. Whereas the report seeks council's approval for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to construct 2 residential towers in the subject site, and whereas the applicant has indicated support for introducing a memorandum of understanding, and whereas council approval is required for the authorization of the execution of an MOU, therefore be it resolved that with respect to the report, Planning Committee approve the following: add a new document 8 to the report entitled Document 8, Memorandum of Understanding, to be forwarded to council along with the staff report. Recommend that council approve the authorization of the execution of the MOU between the city and the applicant. 3, that no payments be made by the city of any monies received pursuant to the Memorandum of Understanding, unless such payments are ratified in a subsequent term of council. 4, that the implementing amendments to the new OP shall not proceed to council until such a time as the MOU is executed. Therefore, be it resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act. So, Chair, I believe the MOU has been circulated to members of committee as well as the motion previously, and just wanted to say thank you to everybody involved. This has evolved over time. It's a new 27, 29-story towers directly at Bank and Riverside in an area that is traditionally been difficult for transit, walking, biking. An unsafe area, lots of accidents in here, and I'm pleased to say staff are also redoing Bank Street here from Billings Bridge all the way south to Walkley and Ledbury. So there's going to be a lot of new homes in this area and new streetscape, which will contribute to the urban fabric in an area that badly needs it. So really pleased with staff and the applicant, as well as our communities who worked on this together to come to this MOU agreement.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. We have no delegations registered for this one. So if there's no need to hold it, I'll ask the applicants who are here if we're prepared to carry this motion and the amended report on consent. Do the applicants wish to speak at all today? Just waiting for them to join the panelists.
Mike Mihak here.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, sorry, I had trouble finding the mute button.
Yeah, if the committee's prepared to carry this on consent, does your team need to speak on it today?
No, we're very pleased, and it's been a great process and looking forward to getting going on this project. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So on Councillor Menard's motion on the MOU, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. And on the report recommendations as amended for item number 5.2, are they carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. Okay, thank you. So that concludes going through the consent agenda. So we'll now go back to any items that we've held. Now for just procedurally, note that Councillor Eli El-Shantiri is participating in our meeting. His name was not read in the roll call, but he has been part of this meeting since the start. Both items 4.1 and 4.2 have a number of delegations registered. Item 4.1 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 delegations, and item 4.2 has 7 delegations. So for any delegations, we appreciate your patience. We'll have 5 minutes for each delegation to present, followed by any questions. The first item is 4.1, in Somerset Ward, the zoning bylaw amendment for 142, 144, and 148 Nepean Street, demolition control for 142 Nepean Street. We do not have a staff presentation since it was done as part of the last meeting, but we will start with a short presentation from the applicants. We have Derek Howe, Miguel Tremblay, and Tim Bede representing the applicants. So when they're on the screen, we will go to a presentation from them to start off, and then we'll go to our delegations. Good morning, Derek.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Derek Howe, and I'm speaking on behalf of the proponent, collectively Glenview Integrate Realty Management, for the application for zoning bylaw amendment and demolition control for 142, 144, 148 Nepean Street. My colleagues Miguel Tremblay and Tim Bede from Foten Consultants are here as well and will assist me with any specific planning or policy question. Thank you, Chairs Gower and Moffat. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak to Planning Committee about this project and the benefits it will bring to the residents of Ottawa. We thank the members of Planning Committee for their approval of the proposed 300-unit residential development at 108 Nepean Street on July 7th. City Council approval of this building will help alleviate the housing supply crisis in Ottawa, as declared by City Council on January 29, 2020. This approval will be a significant step in encouraging the revitalization of Centertown and the Central Business District. This building will be one of the largest apartment buildings in Centertown and will greatly improve the supply of housing. After 2.5 years in a pandemic, I believe we can all agree that our city needs to reinvigorate its downtown core, support more densification as directed by the city's new official plan, encourage private sector economic investment, and to build more affordable housing units. This project achieves all of those objectives and then some. It creates 300 new residential units, 25 of which are affordable units. This is a good project for our city and our residents. To move forward with this exciting development, we do require that Planning Committee approve the 142 Nepean Street demolition control application. These two projects, the 108 Nepean Street mixed-use development, which committee has approved on July 7th, and the 142 Nepean Street demolition control, are fundamentally linked and frankly dependent upon one another to move forward. At this point in time, I would like to kindly clear up a common misconception about these two joint applications. The proponent is not building a second parking lot. We are seeking permission to relocate the parking lot from 108 Nepean Street to the west side of O'Connor Street, to 142, 144, 148 Nepean Street. We are reducing the number of surface parking spaces from 50 to 30. We are not increasing the number of surface parking stalls. This approval, if granted, will then facilitate the commencement of construction of the new 300-unit building, including 25 affordable units of 108 Nepean Street. I want to take a few moments to clarify some of the specific items related to the site at 142 Nepean Street. This building is near the end of its life. We are not proposing to demolish a building in strong working condition. It is quite the opposite. This is a 70-year-old building that is in need of major and significant repairs. In the words of the current owner of 142 Nepean Street, we had always anticipated that our Nepean property would be redeveloped one day, as we are not in a position to do so ourselves. Given its current condition and age, it is an opportune moment for the building and adjacent properties to undergo redevelopment and intensification. Both organizations care about the existing tenants at 142 Nepean Street, and we are taking extraordinary steps to go above and beyond the standard duty of care in situations like this one. We have worked diligently to ensure the tenants of this building find comparable, if not better accommodation, both in location and long-term affordability. To show this, and put our words into action, we have offered the tenants the following: a comparable, if not better unit, less than 100 meters away from their current location with the same number of bedrooms. For the next 5 years, these tenants will pay the same monthly rent that they currently pay at 142 Nepean Street. A parking spot at the new building, should the tenant have one now in their current arrangement. The proponent has agreed to cover all reasonable moving expenses from their current unit to one of the comparable units. In addition, we are providing each tenant with a check for $15,000 to cover additional miscellaneous expenses and to provide for a buffer for an eventual increase in accommodation costs at the end of the 5 years. And lastly, once the new tower is built at 108 Nepean Street, we are offering these tenants a first right of refusal in one of the new affordable units. As we hope you can see here today, we are committed to treating these individuals with the respect they deserve. These tenants are important members of our community, and we quite simply agree. Their right to housing needs to be protected, and we are putting our money where our mouth is to ensure this happens. We are going above and beyond anything we've done before, or for that matter, anything we've ever heard of in the city of Ottawa. At the present time, I wish to confirm that 2 of the 4 tenants have accepted the initial terms of the MOU, and we have communicated that the improved MOU terms will be honored by the proponent. For the remaining 2 tenants, repeated attempts have been made to engage these tenants with constructive and meaningful discussion. We care about these tenants and their future. We will honor the terms of the current MOU with these 2 individuals going forward. We have acted in good faith with the tenant and asked the planning committee in its wisdom approve the applications in front of you so that we may move forward with the 300 unit development, inclusive of 25 affordable units at 108 Nepean Street. We would be happy to further expand on our work to explore alternative options as directed by members of planning committee, if so called upon. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Derek. We will come back to the applicant team for questions following our delegations. We have a number of delegations registered, but at this time it appears that only one person is online. We have Bill Ewenick here, so we will start with Bill, and then we'll check back to see if anyone else has been able to join on this one. So, Mr. Ewenick, if you are with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So you're our first presenter. You'll have 5 minutes, followed by questions from our committee. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Bill Ewenick, and I'm a member of ACORN. I'm speaking here in defense of 142 Nepean and asking that it not be demolished and rezoned. The developer wants to demolish the 6-unit apartment building, which would displace the families living there and destroy affordable housing in favor of a parking lot. The City of Ottawa declared a housing and climate emergency. Approving this proposal would contradict the city's commitment to end these crises. That's why myself and others in the ACORN Tenant Union are calling on you to vote against the proposal today. Like the developer says, the apartment building has been approved by the city. They are holding that building hostage to be able to demolish a building of affordable housing. It is, frankly, quite grotesque and unethical to be kicking families out of a perfectly fine building to build more housing for vehicles, especially downtown near light rail stations and tons of other parking. The car focus in Ottawa is contributing to bad urban planning, more pollution, and worse living experience for those of us downtown. Furthermore, kicking families out of affordable housing is unconscionable. Our city and its staff should not be part of the drive to push marginalized people into precarious housing and homelessness. If this terrible proposal does go through, the landlord should be mandated to offer units with the same number of bedrooms at the current rents with a guarantee of rent control permanently going forward. Offering new units where the rent will double or triple in a few years' time is extractivist politics at its finest and pretty frankly messed up. The board should reject this proposal and legally compel developers to take a teeny portion of the profits to build more actual affordable housing. I recommend housing geared to income at no more than 20% of a family's income because I imagine Ottawa as a friendly, welcoming metropolis instead of the concrete city that it seems to become. Also, having listened to several developers talk in previous meetings about how hard it is to make a profit, perhaps the city should investigate nationalizing one of them or creating their own construction company that works without profit so we can leave the poor developers to focus on more profitable ventures. In final, reject the proposal, save 142 Nepean. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Any questions from the committee? Well, I want to ask Bill that it does seem like a generous offer to the existing tenants that goes above and beyond the legislated requirements for relocation in the event of a demolition. Do you disagree or agree, or can you comment on your perspective on that?
I'm not sure on what the provincial legislations are. I'm sure the developer is being very generous, but as has been stated by other delegates in the past, it's not always what they say they're going to do, doesn't always happen. And I think demolishing a building to build a parking lot is just a bad look for the city.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from committee? Okay, thank you, Bill. I believe we have Natalie Appleyard is one of our speakers. Natalie's joined us. Natalie, are you with us? There you are. Okay, you can go ahead when you're ready. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you to all the members who are present, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Natalie Appleyard. I work as a socioeconomic policy analyst with Citizens for Public Justice. But I'm also here as a member of ACORN and here to support their recommendations regarding this proposal. So as I know has been discussed previously with this council and on a number of issues, we know that Ottawa is in a housing crisis. We've recognized that there's a housing emergency, and we've also recognized that the current zoning rules and restrictions, the current bylaws, the current laws are not living up to our requirements to fulfill the right to housing. This is not something that only happens at the federal level, whereas the federal government has recognized housing as a human right, and as such, different levels of government are duty bearers to make sure that people can enjoy their right to housing, and that is not to say that the city needs to just provide free housing, but the city does have to create the conditions in which people can access affordable, accessible, adequate housing that's consistent with what the UN has laid out as the conditions to create adequate housing. And so to me, the proposal of tearing down one of the few affordable housing spaces in Ottawa, when we know that there's more than 10,000 people in the city of Ottawa waiting for affordable housing, when we know that the existing housing is in need of repair, and there's such a great need to remove some of that affordable housing in favor of parking spaces is totally in opposition to the direction that we need to move in to acknowledge the right to housing. And with regards to the question that was just posed to the last speaker, in terms of what the developer is proposing being generous compared to what is legally required, well, that's just because our legal requirements don't go far enough in honoring the right to housing. And so even though they're offering that tenants would be able to have the rate of first return, and that they're offering that the rent might stay where it is for 5 years. Well, what happens after that? Then they have no legal claim after that. And we know that with the way that rents have increased over time, that 5 years is nowhere near enough time for people to find alternative affordable housing if their rent suddenly skyrockets. There's no guarantee that come 5 years that tenants are suddenly going to be able to afford these new higher rents. And also there's questions about this definition of affordability and who gets to determine what affordability is. If it's a developer, that's usually a certain percentage below market rent, which is not actually affordable for many people, as opposed to rent geared to income. So overall, I just feel that this is totally opposed to the direction that we need to be moving in as a city and with regards to the right to housing. And to go ahead with this proposal would be totally flagrant in the face of the need for affordable housing that this that the city itself has recognized is at a crisis stage right now. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you for anticipating my question. I would have asked you the same thing. I'm just going to hand things over to Chair Moffat for a moment while I resolve a power issue. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you. A question for you, Ms. Appleyard, from Councillor Eglai.
Thanks for coming out this morning. I don't vote on it as part of committee, but I will be voting on this proposed when it gets to council. So the applicant said during the initial presentation that the building was in a state of where it needed to be redeveloped. They didn't have the resources to do that on their own. I'm wondering if Acorn has a position on the condition of the existing building and whether in fact it does need to be upgraded or fixed or something alternative put in its place.
Well, what Acorn has heard is that tenants have reported that they haven't received any evidence from the developer that the structural integrity of the building is at risk. And so to make such bold claims that the building is so far gone that it must be demolished rather than being repaired would need to be substantiated with proof. And at the same time, because the developer is, wanting to demolish and planning to demolish, they're not keeping up with the necessary repairs either. And so, it's the situation is just getting worse. It becomes one of those self-fulfilling prophecies if they're not investing in the repairs that are needed to make sure that it is livable for the current tenants, because they have their eyes on demolishing it and rebuilding. And so again, there's problems there in terms of the current landlord responsibilities to the existing tenants. And also we've heard that there's a lack of proof that the building does in fact need to be demolished.
And just a quick follow-up, the alternative accommodations that are being offered for the 5-year period in buildings that are in close proximity, which I understand, again, from the presentation, some tenants have taken up that offer. How would you describe those buildings versus the buildings, this building in question? Are they comparable?
I'm not aware of that, but other Acorn members I'm sure will be here and could probably speak to that. But again, the question is just maybe some have taken that offer. Always good to question whether people take an offer because they feel they have no other choice, whether or not they are aware of their rights as tenants or whether they feel that this is actually something that they could manage. But just to say
I appreciate that. I was more going, are we comparing apples to apples with the new accommodation, or are we comparing apples to bananas? That's all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. And again, the question would more just be what happens after 5 years. And I think if you look at, for example, how long it takes people on the waiting list for affordable housing to find a home, then that should raise some alarm bells about expecting people to find alternative accommodations within a 5-year period if there's going to be no control on the rent beyond that 5 years.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eglai. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Natalie, for coming out. If this were actually a case where this building, this property was being redeveloped, not being undeveloped into a parking lot, but being redeveloped into housing, and we had a strong policy around, rental replacement. So, where, the existing 6 tenants would have to be housed, permanently in housing at the same cost, rising at the rate of inflation, whatever the rate is each year that's allowed. Is that what you would call a fair and generous offer from someone who's redeveloping, building new housing, which we need? There's no doubt. If this was taking down 6 units to build 100, 200, 300, but those 6 tenants or whomever is left there were protected. Is that a goal that you feel we should be pursuing as a city?
I think that would be the bare minimum requirements for this as a concession. But I still think that removing housing to create parking spaces is also contradictory, not only to our obligations with the right to housing.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I'm saying if it were actually being redeveloped, if they were actually never mind 108. 108 really has very little to do with this. It's a whole different owner, right? The two shouldn't even be linked. And I think that's where the confusion comes in for everyone. Just talking about 142 Nepean. We have an application in front of us to demolish it and then to allow it to become parking. So for that, there's, I don't think there's a modern city anywhere that would agree that that is a good idea. But if it were actually being redeveloped, if this building were coming down and on this lot, we're also building more housing, which we need. We need a lot more housing across the city, in the downtown. We're looking for that type of intensification, that we're looking for that increase in our housing stock, our private housing stock. If that were the case, and this offer were on the table, but it was, it protected tenants, more permanently while they live there, is that something that you feel would be a fair policy or a fair offer from a developer, somebody developing a new property?
I think if the current tenants were protected in perpetuity in terms of rent geared to income and an adequate place to live that is comparable, again, I think there would be questions about do they have kids in schools in a certain school zone? Is there access to public transit that is needed? Access to other amenities that are required, or, is it close to their employment? So would, sometimes even if the rent didn't change, being relocated to another neighborhood or something like that could have other implications. So I think those would still maybe need to be considered. But in terms of the redevelopment of a property, I guess my question would just be what would be the benefit that we would be getting from that? Would we get more units? Would the units become more accessible? Would there be requirements in terms of the affordability of the new units? Because while we do need more housing across the board, where we most need housing is the affordable, accessible housing. And so if this were being redeveloped to meet that need, then, and tenants were taken care of in perpetuity, then I could see that as a good move. But if those conditions aren't met for tenants, and if the affordable housing is just being switched to more profit-driven housing, then I don't know that that's actually moving us forward in terms of what we need as a city and our housing emergency.
Okay, no, I can appreciate that, but this, although we call it affordable housing, this is private market housing. Yeah. So we'd be replacing one for the other, and I do believe that we need more housing, even private market housing. But I do thank you for that response. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Councillor. Just I know we in this conversation, back when we had it the first time, and then even now, there's a lot of hypotheticals, there's a lot of ifs and stuff. I'm probably gonna add a couple more here. So look at this and talk about the scenario of in 5 years from now. So in 5 years from now, there's the risk is that the current tenants who accept these agreements have their rent increased. But if this isn't approved, if this doesn't go forward, if 142 remains in place and 144 and 148 remain vacant, 108 doesn't get built and remains a parking lot, the owner could then redevelop 142, 144, and 148 in 5 years' time. And the tenants at that time could be pushed out. There's no guarantee that they'll be offered anything then that maybe they're being offered now, because who knows who the owner is going to be. And we know this at planning committee. We've had some agreements in some areas that are far better than what we've gotten elsewhere. So there's just no guarantee on that. So in that scenario, you could have the tenants. Yes, they've been able to stay there for 5 more years. Maybe some of them move on, maybe new ones come in, but they could end up, there's a risk that they could end up in a lesser position 5 years from now. A building still gets demolished, a new building gets built on that site, which I agree is much better to replace housing with housing rather than housing for a parking lot. But 108 is still a parking lot that's twice the size of what's being proposed here. Is that better is it worth the risk?
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, Councillor Moffat, I think that just becomes a question of what happens to that proposal at that time. And
There's real people involved here, though, right? There's real people involved. I mean, you and I, we're not directly impacted, right? There's real people involved. So it's, yes, it could be 5 years from now, a different scenario, but the people that are actually living here, they're the ones that are going to be, that we're playing around with when it comes to, do we just deny this and then hope for a better scenario 5 years from now?
Well, I think the goal, and speaking in terms of what Acorn is recommending, and I'm only one of, I'm sure, several Acorn members who will be speaking, but is the protection for the tenants, right? And so if there were an agreement where they were protected in perpetuity and were able to maintain that rent, then that's what we're going to ask for now. If a proposal comes 5 years down the road, that's what we're going to ask for then too. So I understand that we might be dealing with different actors at that time, but that to me is, again, that's where the role of the city comes in terms of ensuring that there are certain minimum conditions that are met. But again, I think, it's not that the position is that any new building or, it's not anti-new housing, right? It's just ensuring that any new housing is actually meeting the needs of the affordable housing crisis, because, just as with any kind of trickle-down economics, that doesn't really work. So just creating more housing in general doesn't actually trickle down and address the needs of affordable housing necessarily. So I think those are just the factors that are at play. So it's making sure that the tenants are protected and that their right to housing is protected is obviously our ultimate goal.
All right, thank you. Another question from Councillor Curry, and then I'll hand it back to Chair Gower.
Well, thank you, Councillor Moffat. So the one thing that I want to get very clear here, because I've had a number of conversations with people from Acorn and from the developers, and that is, if after the 5 years, so what would happen right now is that tenants would move to the building next door and they would have no rent increases for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, my understanding has always been that they will have rent increases as they would have all along, but at the regular amount, 1%, 2%, whatever the province sets it at. That would go on forever. So they have a new place to live that's next door. They have frozen rent for 5 years, but after 5 years, the increases are just 1%, 2%, as they would have anyway. They also, though, if they want, they have the option to move to a building across the road where they would be affordable units, but probably more expensive than what they're used to. But they could also just stay where they are right now, and after 5 years, just have regular increases. Because when people are talking here, it always sounds as if after 5 years, all of a sudden their rent's going to go up to $3,400 a month or something. And that's not my understanding. My understanding is that after 5 years, it'll just go up with the regular amounts. Plus now they're getting a cash bonus. I mean, it absolutely is about protecting tenants, but to me, I think that is what's being offered. Is that not your understanding?
And I don't know if probably others can speak to the specifics, but if that were explicitly stated and that were true, then great. So as you pointed out, Councillor Curry, I think that the concern is what happens after the 5 years, and if they are still held to the same, 1%, 2% rent increases as they normally would, then that's one situation that I think would be acceptable. If it's that they would want to return to the original unit, or excuse me, at the new unit, if then it kind of jumped to market rent. I think that's the concern. So I think if that were clarified and explicitly stated and communicated well to tenants, then I would defer to the tenants to decide for themselves whether that's what they want. And I'm speaking as an ally of Acorn here, but I'm not the tenant myself. So
that is super helpful, Natalie. So let's get that clarified.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Curry. Any other questions? Thank you, Natalie, for your presentation and your answers today.
Thank you.
I think our final speaker on this item is Miranda Gray. Miranda, are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. So my name is Miranda Gray, and while I currently live in Orleans, I previously lived in Sandy Hill, Centertown, and the Glebe. I moved to Orleans when I was not able to find affordable housing in the urban core. I am opposed to valuing car storage over homes. I do recognize the applicant has done quite a bit for the current tenants. However, I am thinking of the people that won't be able to live there in the future. The vacant units have not been filled during this process. There's a risk assessment by the applicant on the maximum payout for the tenants to be moved. If the building was vacant, it still should not be demolished for parking. This was a salvageable building. Its replacement may or may not be deeply affordable housing later. I understand this is a multi-site, multi-partner application in a very unique situation. If this was 2019, when parking was quite limited in the downtown core, I would probably view this proposal differently. However, many downtown workers are still working from home, and there is no great shortage of parking in the downtown core. There's still adequate parking in the immediate area. One of the applicant partners included parking for tenants in the office building in their rental agreements. It is not the duty of the city to assist the applicant in fulfilling their contract. That is their duty. If they wish to offer the office building tenants something other than parking close to the building, as it appears from comments in previous meetings that they're not willing to do, well, that is their choice. But for the short period of construction, the drivers can walk a little further. Every pedestrian and cyclist in the area will put up with construction detours as lanes and sidewalks are closed for construction work. All the able-bodied drivers can bear a piece of the discomfort of construction in the downtown core. So I'm asking you to vote no on the demolition for parking. If you can't vote no, I'm asking you to strengthen the provision that the parking lot is end dated. The parking lot is proposed as needed temporarily. The approval for parking should expire 6 months after the occupancy of the new building is approved. At that point, the land must be redeveloped into some other use. The cars must be accommodated in the new building, even if the office building tenants wish to rent more parking spots. To be clear, it's not just about the current tenants. There's quite a generous package for them, but this is a permanent loss of 6 deeply affordable units. So it's not just the people that are there now I'm concerned about, it's future people that are looking for affordable units in the area. So this is an outright loss of 6 units. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Are there any questions from committee? I'm seeing none. Thank you for joining us. I'll just check one more time with Kelly. Have any of the other registered delegations logged into the meeting, Kelly?
No, they have not.
Okay, so that's the conclusion of our public delegations. We will bring the applicant team back into the panelist room and an opportunity for counselors to ask questions to the applicant. Anyone want to lead off? Any questions? Chair Moffat, once they're on the screen, you can go ahead.
Thanks. I see Derek here, so I'll ask my question. Really just looking for an understanding of what type of conversations took place between over the deferral period. Obviously, you know the conversation that we had at this committee when this came originally. We deferred it for a reason. Just want to understand some councillors had pitched some different, concepts, ideas, asked if you had considered certain things. So I just want to understand a bit more about what discussions did take place, what considerations were made over the last couple of months.
Sure, Councillor Moffat, it'd be my pleasure. I will answer your questions in several fashions, and I will request permission to keep going in more and more detail if you so wish so. On July 7th, members of Planning Committee asked us to investigate alternative options for parking in lieu of the proposal in front of the committee today. We took that direction from Planning Committee very seriously, and we explored a number of alternative options that I would like to share with you today. These options include parking in the underground parking garage in the new residential tower at 108 Nepean Street, parking on 144 and 148 Nepean Street lots only, secure parking elsewhere under a long-term lease scenario, and lastly, purchase another parking lot without a dwelling on it. If so permitted, Councillor Moffat, I would be happy to go into more detail about each of these options.
I think it wouldn't hurt. I mean, I think that was essentially the gist
Okay.
of what we wanted to hear between then and now. So yeah, go ahead.
So, for option one, in terms of the underground parking garage, we have consulted with the chief building official at the City of Ottawa about the feasibility of parking underground in the new tower at 108. Parking below grade while the above grade construction project is underway is rather unprecedented in the City of Ottawa and poses a significant risk. Furthermore, there's a lag of some 18 months between the construction start and completion of the parking garage. Even if this option was feasible from a building code and occupancy perspective, which it is not, the commercial tenants of the office building cannot be without parking for 18 months, and it will constitute a breach of the terms of the lease between the tenant and the office building landlord. In terms of the second option, we have reviewed the request to leave the 142 building in situ and park only at 144 and 148. The proposal in front of you consists of relocating 50 spaces from 108 Nepean Street to 142, 144, 148, and the new proposed site will accommodate approximately 30 vehicles, a reduction of some 20 spaces. If the existing building at 142 Nepean is to remain in situ, a maximum of 15 vehicles only can be accommodated. This reduction is too significant for the current office building landlord to meet his contractual obligation to the tenant with the loss of almost 35 parking spaces for a fully leased office building. The third option, we were asked, why don't you park somewhere else? The current tenants of the office building at 190 O'Connor have a contractual right to park at 108 Nepean Street under the terms of their lease, and more specifically in close proximity to their place of work. We have examined the feasibility of parking in other lots in the surrounding area and have determined that forcing tenants to park at these locations will constitute a breach of their right to enjoy parking across the street at 108 Nepean under the terms of their lease. Secondly, most commercial parking lots do not offer the ability to secure extended terms that run with the term of the commercial leases. Many of these parking lots have termination clauses for the possibility of redevelopment and/or business reasons. And thirdly, the parking commitments at 108 provide for reserved, exclusive, and dedicated spaces for the office building tenant. Third-party parking lots rarely provide that exclusivity to its clientele. Lastly, we were asked to look at purchase another parking lot without a dwelling on it. The Centretown District is a desirable place to both live and work, and the area has seen a number of projects completed over the last 5 years. Based on a recent review, there are a number of development-related applications that have been submitted to the City of Ottawa and to the members of this planning committee for sites that are within close proximity to this development, my apologies. All of these lots are contemplating being redeveloped in the future in some form or fashion. The new official plan contemplates the prohibition of surface parking lot as a permitted use. Any attempts to secure parking for the office building at an alternate location would seemingly run afoul of this new legislation that prohibits pay and display lot. The proposed solution at the Nepean Street lots contemplate the parking being considered as accessory lot to an office building in closer conformity to the policies of the Centertown secondary plan and the intent of the current City of Ottawa zoning bylaw. And lastly, to our knowledge, there are not any available lots for sale of a similar size in close proximity to the office building with similar economic term as the proposed lots at 142, 144, and 148 Nepean. So Councillor Moffat, we did spend some time since the deferral was put forward, and we have examined these 4 options, and that is why we're here to discuss the proposal today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be happy to answer any more questions.
You good, Chair Moffat? That's the end of your questions. Okay, Councillor Curry has a question.
So I want to just get clarification on exactly what I asked when I asked the question. After 5 years, tenants move to another building next door. At the 5 years, rent stays frozen. After 5 years, would the rent just increase as it will for everyone else, 1%, 2%, whatever the province sets it at, or would there be this significant rent increase?
So thank you very much for the question, Councillor Curry. So the current MOU contemplates that has been put forward in front of the tenants today that one of 2 options will happen. At the end of the 5 years, or when the new tower is ready for occupancy, they may move to the new tower under their first right of refusal on an affordable unit. Or they may elect to stay within the existing building that they have relocated to. The intent of the MOU is that at the end of the 5 years, they would then pay the market rent within the building they currently reside in, if they so wish to do so. So what we're doing today is we're fixing the rent for 5 years' time, and there will be no increases. So the rent that they currently pay at 142 Nepean Street, we are providing their right to housing as a result of these applications. Secondly, with respect to the increase at the end of the 5 years, we've stated in our opening remarks that we are providing a check of $15,000, which may be used as a buffer for increased accommodation costs at the end of the 5 years. So what we're happy to say is that we're taking these tenants very seriously. They are important to us, and we're trying to make sure the right to housing is preserved today. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
It does, because it isn't the regular 1%, 2% increase is what I'm hearing. You're saying it would go up to the market rent, but do we know what the market rent would be in 5 years? What would that increase look like?
I don't know what the market rent would be in 5 years, but we're fixing their rent for the first 5 years as it goes forward to the rent they're currently paying.
I know. It's interesting though, Natalie said if it were just simply that they would, after 5 years, go up 1%, 2%, the tenants would be happier with that. I'm wondering if that should have been considered instead of $15,000.
Well, we wanted, I guess the answer to that is we wanted to give them some options at their disposal. So, so that's something we can definitely take under advisement.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that would be a great solution, because then that really keeps them in sort of like the 5 years is a bonus, because they would have had their regular rent increases anyways. And then after 5 years to just have the regular provincial increases would be what they would experience anywhere.
Well, that's correct. I mean, any apartment building that they would move into is subject to the rent control. So they would be moving into any other location, they would be subject to the annual CPI increases. Here, we're maintaining the rent fixed for 5 years.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would say that that should be discussed further, but I do appreciate that everything that we're talking about here now is about making sure the tenants are taken care of. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Another concern is just the way we're supposed to be planning now in the core and what our new official plan says, and it's very much focused on the fact that we have twin big issues, twin crises in the city of climate change and affordable housing and homelessness. Those are two areas that the city declared emergencies on, and that we need to consistently work on and been improved as part of our new official plan. And so it's difficult when the proposal is on its own to raise the lower income housing to build a surface parking lot next to an LRT station in the midst of those two twin crises. And so I recognize the 30 office workers drive in and need those spaces. The 166 spaces that we approved at the other site, obviously we were looking for some more, I guess, flexibility, right? And what I heard from city staff is that essentially the same proposals come back to us with a small change in the MOU. And so I'm disappointed that we're not in a better place. So I guess my question is, I still don't understand why during the construction of those 166 parking units, given the state of the core right now, which is that there's many unused parking spaces in the core right now, because of what we've just been through for the last 2.5 years, I find it, and the question is just, I find it difficult to believe, and maybe you can change my mind, that there's not leasable 30 spaces within the core that could be used in the interim while those are being constructed. And so that specific option seems to me to be one that you should be pursuing in this case, because I can't get behind a proposal that's going to take down some housing for a parking lot. If you're building more housing here and there was anti-displacement policies in place, I could get behind that potentially, but that's not what is in front of us. It is a parking lot replacing housing, surface parking lot replacing housing next to an LRT. So maybe you could just explain more about the leasable spaces in the core right now and why for those 18 months of construction, those couldn't be used for those 30 folks driving in.
Sure, Councillor Menard, I'd be happy to answer your question. You've asked me several questions and I'll try to answer them one at a time. The proponent is not building a second parking lot. We are seeking to relocate the parking lot from 108 Nepean Street to the west side of O'Connor Street. We are reducing the number of surface parking spaces from 50 to 30. We are not increasing the number of surface parking stalls. We have to keep in mind that we are creating 300 new residential units, of which 25 are affordable in Centretown. I think we can all agree on the consensus that we agree that more affordable housing needs to be brought to the market and more supply of housing needs to be brought to the market, which is what we are doing. This project just steps away from the LRT and transit. It's a significant investment that will encourage ridership and people to relocate to the downtown core. We are actually reducing the amount
Mr.
of
Howe,
surface
I'm sorry,
parking.
I just wanted to get to the question though, and I know I was a bit long-winded in my question, but the question really was, did you look into the option of available leasable spaces within the core, which there are many at this point, for the transition period before that 18-month build out? Did you look at that as an option?
We have examined with a number of parking lots in the downtown core for long-term lease scenarios that I discussed, Councillor Menard, in terms of option 3. We have spoken to a number of current owners in the downtown core about entering into a long-term lease that provides for exclusive dedicated parking for 30 to 50 vehicles. And the resounding answer is largely no. They are all contemplating some form of redevelopment and they are all preserving their rights. Secondly, the majority of the existing parking lots are currently operated as commercial parking lots, and the commercial parking lots generally have a significant churn, which results in a greater gross income per month than it would be on a monthly basis. So the current arrangement that many of our respected developers have on their own lots is that they're currently running them as commercial parking lot, and or they are getting ready to develop in the near term. Secondly, from a business, sorry, I was just going to answer your last question.
Sorry about that, I might have lagged out.
It's okay. From a business perspective, the two organizations have collaborated and partnered together to bring forward the application for the new tower. This creative partnership has taken 2 small parcels of land adjacent to each other, and we have successfully received planning approval for this proposed tower. The partnership is strictly for the residential tower only, and it does not extend to the office building and the associated parking. So Glenview has been the owner of the office building for many decades and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. So we have looked at the availability of parking for a significant number of vehicles for exclusivity parking 24 hours a day. It is very, very hard to come by. And secondly, a proposed business arrangement whereby we have vehicles from another property parking within the proposed tower is not something that we're prepared to consider today.
And that's what I'm getting at really is because that's what I did ask you to consider last time. And what I heard was that there was no flexibility with staff. And so Chair, I understand what the proponent is saying here with the other options, but the 18 months that we're talking about a build out is not a long-term lease. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about a short-term lease for 18 months with many available parking spots right now in the core. And I fail to believe that that is not an option right now for those 30 spaces. So I haven't been convinced otherwise, and I wish there was more flexibility in coming back with this application, that there was some changes that should have come back with this, but we didn't see that. And so I appreciate the answers, and sir, I'll move on. We've both spoken a lot, but Chair, I'll let you.
I would like to answer one thing though. The period of time is not 18 months. We have heard from the chief building official that it would be near impossible to park underground after 18 months.
And that's not what I'm saying, right? I mean, that's not, this is what you keep saying, but what I'm saying is that there will be 30 leasable spots outside of that project in the core with a lot of empty spaces right now that could be utilized during the build out. And at the end of the build out, you have 166 new parking spots that are being created here that with some flexibility could be utilized for the purpose you're talking about, which is parking for a business. And that's what I was hoping you would get at, but I'm hearing from you today that you're not willing to change those 166 spots in any way to accommodate that use. So you're gaining a lot of parking spots here when you look at the totality, but the use of them is not being changed, and we're taking down potentially housing for more surface parking, for more parking stalls. So I appreciate it, Chair, and I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, yeah, we'll keep moving on. Councillor Egley.
Thanks, Chair. So a couple of my colleagues have sent me messages saying, why are you here? You're not on this committee, and you're not coming back next term. And I'm here because this file, I'm going to have to vote on it, and it makes me itchy, and I'll tell you why. We had not exactly the same scenario, but we had homes that council at the end of the day permitted to be removed to allow the extension of parking for a church project in my ward. That didn't make sense to me at the time, and I thought that we should be able to find a way to fix it, and we didn't. So I look at this as at a second kick at the can. To me, this should not be an insurmountable problem. And I don't like the implicit threat that if we don't get this, then you're not going to get the units. There has to be a way, and I think Councillor Curry sort of set the table for that with the questions that she had. And so what I'd like to hear from you, Mr. Howe, is you were questioned by Councillor Curry about the $15,000, whether that made sense versus saying to people, you can stay in the unit that you've been in for the 5 years, and you will only be subject to the provincial increases, and there won't be like a bubble payment or a balloon payment rather to make up for the 5 years. So what I'd like to hear, and I think we've heard from Acorn that it'd be something that could be looked at, is what are you able to do in that regard? Would you be prepared to modify your proposed memorandum of understanding to say you can take the $15,000 and move out, or you can choose to stay in where you've been relocated for the last 5 years and only pay rent in accordance with the provincial increases? Because I think that would go a long way to making people feel more comfortable with the proposal. I heard you take it under advisement, but what I'm saying is I think we'd all like to hear whether you're prepared to actually do it.
I think Councillor Egley, so if I'm hearing you correctly, and I apologize to the committee here, what I agreed, when I had that under advisement, I just didn't quite sure about being on the spot. So I think what I will give you right now, Councillor Egley, is that we will definitely modify the terms of the MOU such that if the current tenants that elect to move into one of the comparable units, the rent in year 6 would be equivalent to the rent in year 5 plus the CPI as mandated by the province of Ontario, which is known as the allowable I apologize, I don't know the specific name, the permissible allowable annual increase. So that is something that would, as you mentioned, Councillor, would provide more comfort. In the year 6, as I'm saying here, year 6 rent for the 4 tenants that elect to enter into the MOU, they would be subject to a year 6 rent equivalent to year 5 plus the CPI. So between 2 and 3%, in terms of today's dollars.
No, and I think we heard from an Acorn member that was something that they would look at more favorably. And I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm assuming you only mentioned year 6, but that pattern would continue into year 7, 8, and 9, and so on. In other words, only the allowable. There'd be no balloon payment anywhere along the way.
Correct, sir. The annual increases after year 5 would be only subject to the permissible increase as mandated by the province of Ontario, and there would be no balloon payment. There would be no back-ending payment. So I do thank you for the suggestion to both Councillor Curry and Councillor Egley. We would be absolutely prepared to modify the terms either within this meeting or shortly thereafter, but I can tell on behalf of the proponent, we would do that.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and that might be helpful to this committee and its deliberations and further at council. I'm going to ask you a question that I asked the Acorn member, and who she was not able to answer the question, and fair enough. Are we comparing between where the tenants are living now and where you're proposing that they be able to live for the next 5 years? Is that an apples to apples, or is that an apples to bananas, as the analogy I used? Are they very similar units and very similar types of accommodations buildings, or are they getting into a different kind of scenario?
I think for the purposes of the discussion between apples and bananas, I can absolutely state that these units would be comparable. They would certainly not be deficient, which is, I think, the more important consideration that should be put on the table. So as I mentioned, these units will be equal or comparable to what they are currently residing in. Secondly, both of these buildings are currently managed by respected property management firms in the city of Ottawa, and we do take pride in our ownership of these assets, and we do respond to tenant requests. So I'm very confident in saying it's equal or better. So perhaps apples to cherries.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for those clarifications. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Egley. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. Gentlemen, I was thinking about you this summer. Like many, I was road tripping and visited a number of cities, and at every hotel virtually that my wife and I stayed at, I was in commercial parking garages where there was lots of reserved parking for the hotel, the office, exclusive use of parking for third-party tenants is not new. It's not out of the ordinary. How many parking spots do you need to replace during the course of construction? Like, how many people do you have to find alternative parking for?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Leeper. So in terms of the existing parking lot, the lot at 108 Nepean Street, which services the building, the office building, we currently have a requirement of 50 spaces. We're currently prepared to reduce that down to 30 spaces. So during the period of the next 1 to 2 years, there will be some negotiations reducing 50 spaces under obligation to 30. So I would suggest to you, depending on when we start construction and the rolling over the leases, it's between 50 and 30 spaces we have to accommodate elsewhere.
And will some of those be accommodated on the currently vacant parcels that are proposed to be some replacement parking?
Could you just repeat the question again? I just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Yeah, my understanding is that you will be permitted to use the currently vacant, so unoccupied by a residential structure properties on the Nepean, that some of those will be able to be used for parking.
I will answer, provided that we have permission to do so. on 148 and 144 Nepean Street. There may be some short-term parking that is permissible there, but from a long-term perspective, the intent is that ultimately we will be able to park 30 spaces on those Nepean Street lots.
That's assuming the demolition, but I'm taking a look at the currently vacant Nepean Street properties and trying to figure out how many vehicles you could park on there.
Between 10 and 15 is our estimate, depending on A, compliance with the bylaws, and B, the final design could be parked there.
Okay. So, you know, if we provided temporary parking exemption for the currently vacant lots, which is a regular mechanism that we have, you know, that reduces that 30 to 50 by some further number. So let's say there's a couple of dozen to 3 dozen vehicles that you need to find a solution for 18 months. On the assumption that you will then be able to move those vehicles into the new building, right? That does not seem unachievable. I have to share Councillor Menard's disappointment that what we're seeing today is a tweak of the MOU in terms of tenant protection, but I just don't see any signs of serious work on trying to find 18 months worth of parking for a couple of dozen vehicles. Did you, I remember I suggested Place Belle, which has got to be relatively empty right now. Did you approach them about the possibility of some temporary parking?
What I would like to clarify something for, I will answer your question. I'd like to clarify something. We do not have permission to park underground in a new building after 18 months. We have been told by the chief building official, it has never been done and it is unprecedented. We simply stated the period of time for a new parking garage to be built is 18 months. It is between 4 and 5 years before a new construction project would have full occupancy above and below grade. So this is not an 18-month search, respectfully. This is a 4 to 5 years. So we did not explicitly approach Place Belle, but general commercial experience that I have is that generally they will not enter into long-term leases for exclusivity reasons. So we have approached several other lots in terms of outside downtown lots, including 307 Lisgar, the Halt's Playfair McGarry site, and some of the other sites. So we have not received a positive response to enter into a long-term lease of 5 to 10 years for even several dozen parking spaces, because they are preserving their right to develop. I hope that answers your question, sir.
No, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Chair, and I won't be too long. I do share some of the similar concerns that were raised, Mr. Howe. I'm wondering, you're starting to name a number of properties, and obviously being at City Hall every day, I get to see what's happening. To me, the World Exchange Plaza is an untapped space. I understand that many of the firms at World Exchange, including Deloitte, have significantly reduced their workforce and do provide ground parking in the nearby buildings the same. So you've made choices in terms of who you've reached out. The funeral home that you were describing does need their surface parking, and we've all gone to funerals there on a daily basis, so I would not expect them to be a potential partner. Can you, just so I understand the range and areas, what was the walkable underground lot, existing underground lots that you captured in that effort?
Okay, in terms of the underground lot, we predominantly focus on some of the surface lots in terms of close. Laurier, and as far south down as past Somerset. So that would be the general catchment in a north-south direction. In an east-west direction, we looked at 1 or 2 streets east and west of O'Connor Street in terms of potential opportunities for parking. So that would be the catchment area in terms of what we've looked at.
And so that is a little smaller than what the World Exchange location. I'm naming one without having a conversation with Morgard, who I believe is the owner, and obviously leaving it in good hands of the local councillor. Do you have any objections to an agreement at World Exchange from a distance point of view?
You know, I can speak to that point because I recognize that it's an important point on behalf of the members here today. Currently, at the 190 O'Connor Street office building, which is approximately 95% leased, all of these tenants have the right to park across the street. The current landlord of that office building does not have the legal right or permission to simply relocate their parking elsewhere, and it will constitute a material breach of their contract. I mean, that is why we're here today to discuss the parking. But while to some extent I do agree there are parking lots elsewhere, we do have to remember that the office building has material terms in the terms of their lease with all of these tenants that cannot just be changed. There is no avenue from a leasing perspective to simply instruct or request that they park elsewhere. Secondly, the material—
Can I stop you on that? Because I do think it's an important point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there are legal agreements, as you've described, that state as such. Is that been discussed with those lessees of looking at options, or is that just simply relying on legal words and an agreement? I'm curious to understand that a bit better.
I can answer that, definitely. I think that's a very good question. Thank you, Councillor Fleury. So at the present time, we have not opened up extensive discussion with an entirely fully leased up office building about relocating their parking. You can appreciate that in this current time of COVID, where we are trying to entice workers to come back to the core, come back to their place of work, we're trying to maintain a sense of stability and calmness as it relates to these tenants coming back to this office building. Secondly, simply asking them to relocate from a walk across the street to several blocks away, while it may not seem significant to the members of this panel today, it is a significant concern for some of the tenants, and that is one of the reasons why they entered into leases in this building, precisely because of the fact that they have parking available to them across the street. So it is not as easy as just saying, would you like to move 5 blocks up the street and park? Thirdly, I would like to say the material business terms of parking on a monthly basis in a below grade stall at an office building, for example, would be significantly more expensive than a surface parking lot. So there is a material impact in terms of both proximity to the existing office building and as well as either an increase in parking costs to the landlord, which is not something that we were looking to go, looking to enter into. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I would have 2 follow-up elements. One is, I've lived this very directly with the Chateau Laurier. Very different property, I recognize, but the Chateau Laurier does not have the capacity it used to have. Chateau Laurier does have long-term commercial lessees on the property. And to my knowledge, they've signed a long-term agreement with the NAC for underground parking for their needs. And they've made that work with their existing commercial lessees and for daily hotel users successfully. I recognize the financial impact that you're describing on the underground aspect, but I do think that is a great caveat for those who lease. Right now, you're parked at the surface. There are underground options. Yes, a few blocks away, but your car will stay warm. Your car won't live through the rust impacts of being at surface. So I think there are assumptions of benefits or non-benefits to lessees that are maybe overplayed. I understand there are financial pressures, and I respect that. That is one of the points. But I do nuance that I do see advantages to being underground for lessees, even if it means walking an extra block. My perspective.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Fleury. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something on the numbers. You're applying for 30 parking spots between 142, 146, 148 Nepean. Is that correct? That's what you're looking for here, is if you get the right to demolish, but on that block, you are looking to replace the 50 that are over at 108 with 30 over at 142 to 148. Is that correct?
That is a correct statement, Councillor McKinney.
Okay. So it's not 30 to 50, it's 30. That's good. That's good to clarify. And just going
So
back.
if I may interrupt, it is 50 to 30. So 50 on the east side of O'Connor Street, currently at 108 Nepean.
Yep.
And we will be reducing that to 30 at 142, 144, 144, 148.
Yes. No, that's my point. So 30, we're talking about 30 spots. So we're looking at, how do we accommodate today? 30 spots is what we're talking about. So the portion of the lot that is empty today, if you were to get either permanent or temporary parking allowed on that portion, is it, I look at it, and to me, I've gone down there, it looks like it's close to at least 2/3 the size of the entire lot is empty today. So is it a fair assessment then to say that without removing this building, let's just say that, I know that that's not your goal, but without removing the housing that is there today, how much space is there? Like, what's a sufficient number of parking spots in the space that is empty today? What could you fit in there?
The answer to your question, Councillor McKinney, is we believe today we can fit approximately 15 parking spaces on 144 and 148. It is all subject to the final approval of the City of Ottawa planning staff. But one consideration is that with the 3 lots in play, we're able to have more than one drive aisle. With the simple 2 lot, we're only able to have one drive aisle, and the city generally frowns upon double loaded parking within parking spaces. So there is some limitation to the design that can be accommodated just with the 2 lots only.
Right. However, we do allow double loaded parking. It happens all over. Less and less now because, the downtown doesn't have as much people coming into it to park. But we do double loaded parking. We could go up and down Lisgar, Slater, Albert, and find double loaded parking. So there is a possibility really with double loaded parking for even more than 15 spots in the portion of this entire property that is already vacant. So without removing anyone's housing for parking, we could allow double loaded as a temporary use and fit 30 parking spots, or at least 20 or 25. I realize you still need, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Miguel Fraile, did you want to add?
Well, I had answered this question at the last committee. I did sketch it out. I don't think you get anywhere near 20 because you don't have the depth to do a double loaded, is what I said last planning committee. So you'd have to rely on some parallel parking spaces, and I estimated about 3 to 4. So what I told the committee last time is you're looking at probably about 10 parking spaces with variances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Sorry. So this is not half the lot then? Like I'm just having a hard time understanding how a larger portion of the lot will only allow for 10 parking spots when adding another 1/3 will allow for 30. I just don't understand the geometry that you're using.
It's the loop driveway. We can do a dead end stub, but you don't get the depth of 5.2 plus 6 plus 5.2 to make it work. So with variances, we could fiddle with it angled parking, but the problem is the current design has angled parking, but only because it's a one-way loop. In the absence of that, you can't do angled parking. So the way I've sketched it out would be single loaded on one side and then parallel on the other. Thank you.
Chair Moffat.
I just want to follow up on that, Miguel. Just quickly, you mentioned the stub, the dead end stub. So I'm back in July, I spoke about this. You look at the aerial views of 287 Lisgar, the exact width of 144 and 148 has a stub with parking, and there's 22 cars parked there.
Yeah, so, but it's not designed to municipal standards. So what I said is you would need variances to reduce the depth of the spaces, the width of the drive aisle. You'd probably have to forego landscaping, which is something that this new proposal has on the current design. So as I said, you need variances to make it work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? If not, then we will move now to questions for staff. I have a question for staff to lead it off. This has been linked to the 108 Nepean development. I'm concerned about the risk that if we approve demolition of 148 Nepean, and then for whatever reason, the development at 108 Nepean does not go ahead, we might end up with a worst case scenario of having 2 parking lots downtown. Is there any legal protection or enforcement ability that the city has to ensure that we don't end up in a situation where we end up with 2 parking lots, 2 surface parking lots?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, staff were mindful of that very scenario, and the conditions of approval protect against that. Within the proposed demolition agreement, there is a unique condition to this site that is not part of our standard conditions, and it reflects that demolition is not permitted to proceed until the building at 108 Nepean has commenced construction. So through those conditions, we've protected against the scenario of not putting ourselves in a position of having 2 surface parking lots. And it's legally enforceable through that agreement.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, for clarifying that. Any other questions for staff? I have a procedural question for staff, and it's around the deferral motion that we had last time. So we deferred the item, but there was also a motion being deferred, I believe, in the text of that deferral motion. I know there's a new recommendation 4 that was added in this report. I just wanted to check with Mr. Mark, with the clerk's office, that we are procedurally covering off everything we need to as per that motion.
I will ask Mr. Mark to weigh in if he is on the call, and perhaps planning staff as well, to advise on whether the new recommendation 4 that was added to the staff report renders the referred motion with respect to the MOU moot. If so, then the committee would not need to vote on it. And so I would seek staff's clarification perhaps before providing additional procedural advice.
Yes, I can speak to that, Mr. Chair. There was a part of the deferral was that staff had the opportunity to come back with a new report. The report was updated, as you're aware, to replace the MOU, so that the MOU itself was updated with the details that Mr. Howe spoke about. And by the same token, the staff report was updated to provide recommendations about how the MOU would be executed prior to the bylaw being proceeded. I'll have Mr. Mark confirm, but my understanding is that replacement MOU would make the previous motion moot.
I concur, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for setting us straight on that. Are there any questions for staff? Anyone on committee want to do a wrap up? Councillor McKenney.
Oh, thanks, thanks, Chair.
I can go first if you want to go last.
Sure, if you, yeah, no, sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
just knowing it's in your ward. And who knows, I might say something that you want to rebut. So this has been I think it's a tough one. I get like the members of the committee will feel it's a bit tough. It's like there's like a big picture, then a bigger picture, then there's like a biggest picture. Like there's all these different things to consider here, where there's 142 and then there's 144 and 148, and what's the future of those two, and then there's 108 and what happens with that, and then there's the folks that actually live at 142 today. I look back on, we did Herringate. I remember in the end of that, I remember saying that there's, you could push for more, but at the risk of the people who live there now, and the risk that you could end up with less if you keep pushing. We do this around this table, around council, from the comfy confines of the Sunshine List, but the residents who live there obviously don't have the same luxuries that we have. And I don't disagree that this building doesn't need to be demolished. I do believe that they could figure this out in 144 and 148 with enough parking to be able to make this whole thing work. But to push for that, I run the risk of ensuring that the folks who live in 142 lose what's being offered to them, and in the future not receiving anywhere close to what's being offered to them today. I think that's where I have a challenge. It's so easy for me to take a risk on this, knowing that I'm not the one that has to suffer the outcome if it doesn't work out. It's the 4 tenants of 142 that have to suffer the outcome. So it's not easy. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but that's my concern. I mean, ultimately, when it comes down to it, my concern is that we take a chance, we push back. I don't think it's wrong to push back, but I don't feel comfortable risking what could be a better deal for these tenants to find an alternative housing and transition there than they would get 5 years from now. So that's where I sit at the moment. Again, not an easy spot, not an easy conclusion here, but there's no perfect outcome here.
Thanks, Councillor Moffat. Councillor McKenney, if you don't mind, I'd like to just say a few quick thoughts. I think a lot of us are probably on the fence on this one, and acknowledging that the offer from the builder to the existing tenants is above and beyond what they're required to do legislatively, even if that minimum requirement is pretty pathetic in general. I think the way I'm thinking about this is we're being asked if a demolition is appropriate and necessary. And I wasn't totally convinced last time, and I'm still not convinced today, that demolition is the only solution to solve the applicant's parking problem. So I'm leaning towards voting against the demolition, but I'll be interested to hear Councillor McKenney's closing remarks.
So thank you. Thank you to everyone. This has been a good conversation. I think we are dealing with real people here, and at least 2 of the households don't want to leave. Some of the others have left, knowing what's coming. 2 don't want to leave. They've seen what's on the table, the offer, and they're not willing, and they're not just not willing. They don't want to leave their homes. But beyond that, this is an application that these recommendations should have never been linked. These applications should have never been linked. We need to look at what's in front of us based just on the merits of, should we allow for the demolition of a 6-unit apartment building anywhere in this city, but in particular in the downtown, for surface parking? And the answer to that is no. If this had not been linked to 108 Nepean, which it should not have been, nobody is opposed to 108 Nepean being developed. But I can tell you that we have had dozens, just in the last decade, dozens of applications across the city for development that have not been moved on. What we also have in this city are many, many examples of this very type of housing, not just here, but across the city, where we have small 4, 6, 12 unit buildings, and we cannot lose them. This is the exact type of housing that we need to retain. And if there was an application in front of us today for demolition to build what's as of right housing, yes, of course, we would be saying yes. We need more housing. We need more housing stock. And at that point, with that in front of us, we would have to think about, how do we protect existing residents? And we have to consider that as a city moving forward. But we have two things in the city. We have this type of building that is older stock. As a result, it's affordable. And we have many empty parking lots. So we do not have a scarcity of parking. Just in a 2-block radius of 190 O'Connor, just in a 2-block radius, we've got 307 Lisgar, which is empty. We've got 355 Cooper, 138 Gloucester. In 2020, we approved a zoning bylaw amendment to add a parking garage as permitted use to 287 Lisgar. So there is ample parking, there's ample surface parking within a 2-block radius, but there is not ample housing. And it's not about the displacement of who is there today. It's about the loss, the permanent loss of 6 units. And again, I have to remind you that for every 1 unit of social housing that we build in this city, we lose 7 affordable housing units. It is why 2,000 people slept in a shelter last night. It is why over 200 families slept and stay in motels right now. Hundreds of families, children are living in motels because we don't have enough housing for people in this city. And you might argue, well, then you're not going to get 300 units over here. But I would argue back, we have approved many, many applications for development. We can't do more than just approve them. We are approving 108. What we're saying is, in this case, I would argue it's 10 to 15 spots. It's not even 30, because we have that, the other side of the lot, which actually had 2 homes on it. 2 homes that were neglected so long that they had to be demolished. And there is ample room for parking. We probably shouldn't allow it, but better than taking down an existing 6-unit building. So I appeal to you today to consider this application just based on the merits of demolition for parking, not what's happening at 108. We are going to allow 108 to proceed. We can push back. We can push back and say, you know what? There are other parking opportunities, not rights. You have a right to housing. You don't really have a right to parking, but there are other parking opportunities just in a 2-block radius for 10 to 15 cars. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? All right, then with that, we will go to a vote. Kelly, if you can assist with that, please. So this is on the report recommendations for item 4.1, a zoning bylaw amendment for 142, 144, and 148 Nepean Street, and demolition control for 142 Nepean Street.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes, but I'm going to dissent on item 2.
Okay. Councillor Cluche?
Yes.
Councillor Curry?
Yes.
Councillor Dudas?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Kitts?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor Menard,
No.
Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri,
Yes.
Chair Moffat,
Yes.
and Chair Gower.
No.
8 yeas and 4 nays.
Okay, thanks everyone for the discussion. I'm now going to hand the chair to Councillor Moffat for the next item, 4.2 on the agenda. Scott.
Thank you very much, Chair Gower. So the next item on the agenda is in Canada North, 100 Stacy Drive. So I believe we'll have a presentation from staff to begin with, to which I believe Molly Smith will be doing that.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair and committee members. This presentation is for the zoning bylaw amendments at 100 Stacy Drive. Next slide, please. The subject site is in Canada North. It is vacant. It is a vacant lot at the end of Stacy Drive and is approximately 800 meters from the Tarrant March Road intersection. The current zoning is Business Park Industrial, subzone 6, with a maximum height of 14 meters. The proposed zoning amendment seeks to rezone the property to R4Y with an urban exception, schedule, and holding symbol. The rezoning is for 2 4-story apartment buildings with a total of 258 residential units. There would be 206 parking spaces with a mix of underground parking and limited surface parking. Next slide, please. In the current official plan, the site is designated as general urban area. It permits a range of uses, including residential. In the new official plan, the site is within the suburban transect, Canada North Economic District, with an evolving neighborhood overlay. This future designation, if approved by the ministry, will permit residential uses alongside employment, institutional, and commercial uses. The intention is to have a fully integrated live, work, play, and learn environment for residents. The new official plan image in the top right corner illustrates where the future bus rapid transit stations will be located along March Road. Those are the blue circles. Other policies and guidelines applicable to the site are the guidelines for new development and proximity to rail operations. The guidelines require 30-meter setbacks from all abutting property lines to the rail corridor. The development complies with these setbacks. And another applicable guideline is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks D6 guidelines. A separation analysis between the subject property and surrounding landowners was conducted. Through that analysis, the proposed zoning will ensure that the proposed residential buildings have a minimum separation distance. Next slide, please. The proposal contributes to a 15-minute neighborhood by providing in proximity to transit, employment, services, and amenities, such as grocery stores and other commercial uses, and meets the intent of the future Canada North Economic District. Next slide, please. The proposal is sensitive to surrounding uses by ensuring adequate setbacks and buffers. Setbacks include 20 meters from the abutting property to the north, 30 meters from the rail line, and the site is over 50 meters away from the single detached homes to the south, separated by Kimmins Court Park. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was quicker than I anticipated. So, okay, thank you. So we'll move now to the applicant. And we have five individuals here on behalf of the applicant. So if we can let them come in and present to us? So I see Mark Rivet. Will you be doing the presentation, Mark?
Good morning, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Are you running the presentation? Can you hear me, Mark? Mark, hello. Mark. Bueller? Bueller? Mark, can you hear me at all?
I can hear you, yes. Not
Okay.
too sure who's sharing the screen though.
So we are. So our clerk's office put that up on the screen. Are you presenting? Are you ready?
No, I'm not presenting, and that's not the project, so I'm not too sure what's on the screen.
I just wanted to.
It is a beautiful project. Not too sure what that all is. Yes, my name is Mark Rivet, Senior Planner Associate with Jill Richards and Associate, representing Brazil. I am in full support of the staff recommendation, and I am here today as well as representatives from Brazil, should there be any questions from committee.
So do you have a presentation or no?
No, we don't have a presentation.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go straight to, we might come back to you for questions. We'll come after, we'll do delegations, and then we'll come back to the applicant for any questions that members of committee might have.
Perfect.
So with that, we have 7 registered delegations for this item, and we'll start with Robert McCauley of the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association. I kind of thought it would have been interesting if he just presented on that other application just to see how it went.
Chair, he's not on the call.
Robert's not on the call?
No.
Okay. So next would be Ed Watts.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Watts. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. You have 5 minutes. You can start anytime.
Okay. Well, first, I want to thank Kathy Curry. She spent a lot of time coming up to speed on this. And also there's been quite a few in the neighborhood that have put a great deal of effort into their input on this. So thanks to all of those. I did send several sets of input, including the one earlier in the week that went to all of the planning committee. So hopefully that that information is familiar to you, and I don't have to basically read out my email in my valuable 5 minutes. I'm just checking a few notes here. So yeah, it's kind of hard for me to know what is the best way to make the presentation here. But I'm just going to go to another screen here if you give me a minute. Sorry, I'm not that well prepared. I'm out of town. All right, I'm not going to be able to find that screen quickly. Anyway, I was hoping that with all of the input that was presented by people over the past several weeks, that people would understand the issues that the residents and the businesses in the area have with this. They come along the lines of, it's not compatible with the neighborhood. The street is a dead end street, and the only egress option is back out through Stacy Drive and Terran Road, which is already listed as a failed intersection in the city. And it handling the additional traffic from this, along with all of the other development that has already been approved in the area, it's going to fail. I'm sure it's going to fail. So therefore, other egress options are going to have to be found. And in finding those egress options, it may come down to expropriating land to create a route out to March Road from that area, as opposed to having to go all the way back down Stacy to Terran and out to March, which, by the way, would be the route that someone would have to walk if they were going to go to public transit right now, because you cannot walk across a rail line and across private property to sneak out the back door basically to March Road. I don't think that, at least that would be an option that the city would want to accept. So with upgrades to public transit not coming to well into the 2030s, it doesn't look like a very good egress option. Let's see what else is on my list. Sorry about that. You know what, I'm just going to call it at that because I've lost track of the notes that I have somewhere else on my cell phone here. I know that you've seen the input. I hope you've taken the time to go through that and understand the viable points that were made there. So I think I'll hold for now and maybe join in on questioning if I think of something else.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Watts. Any questions for our delegation? Yes, Councillor Curry.
Thanks a lot, and thanks, Ed. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on why Stacy Drive is considered a failed intersection. I know there are many presentations coming up, but I thought I'd ask you that question now so that committee members can understand what it's really like there at Stacy Drive.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there are 2 schools on Varley Crescent, and the main option for people who want to drop their children off at school would be to come along Varley and back down Stacy out to Terran Road and then back out to March Road. The biggest problem at that intersection is when you're at Stacy Drive and you want to make a left so that you can have that short couple hundred feet to then get on to March Road. There's only room for about 4 cars waiting for the left turn lane onto March Road. So that traffic in the rush hour in the morning, especially around the time of student drop-off, that backs up way past Stacy Drive. So there's nowhere to turn. Like, people try to be courteous and all that, but there's nowhere for the people on Stacy to turn. So then Stacy backs up. So you've got people that are coming in that way to drop kids off and then trying to get back out that way again. And it's pretty rough. So a lot of people, I think, now are trying to avoid that by going through town. But if you go through town, meaning Varley, then you're going down the very congested street with school buses and all these people dropping off kids. It's not a good option either. So it's very awkward. And I think that's the main that particular intersection is the problem. If you want to go north on March Road, there's no sense turning right on Terran, because then you're going all the way back down to Campo again, and it's just a bad situation.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Ed. We'll talk about that some more, but I appreciate you giving your perspective on that, and thanks for presenting here today.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Mr. Watts. Our next delegation is, I believe, Marianne Wilkinson. Hello, Marianne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sent out pretty lengthy information to most members. I missed sending it to Eli, so I apologize if he's still on the line. But I think this is an important one that dates back to the time of the beginning of Canada. Because Canada was as a planned town. It was planned from the start, and I've been involved pretty well all the way along on that. And it overall plan as housing, planned neighborhoods, communities, a town center, open spaces, and a technology park. And that technology part was very important because we wanted the people who lived in the community to be able to work in the community. And that has worked because 50% of the people who work in the business park live within 5 kilometers right now. Rather than planning by individual sites, what we did was we looked at the total plan and not just looked at the one piece of land. And that's a problem we've had a bit with recent times with this one particularly, that it looks like they're looking only at this one piece of property and not at the whole plan itself. The site is very isolated in the business park even, and it's almost completely built up now with businesses, but it doesn't have any good connections. You cannot plan to use crossing through private properties as there are distances to get to places. We have to look at what is going on the public reign, either in the pathway parkway system or along Stacy Drive. And it is 900 meters to the nearest transit spot. That's well beyond the normal one we do. And that is not a close one. They're trying to say 400 because that's when you cross somebody's private property. But when that happened before, the private property owners closed it off, and they have every right to do that and probably would. And the railway is not accessible either. So you can't get across it. So you have to look at the public realm. So it's isolated. There is previous discussions for using it for housing were rejected before even an application was made. So there's no record of it, but it was happened. We need more job creation because the number of new residential developments that are planned right now, all 4 of them you just approved on this committee meeting, they're all in that Canada North area. We're going to need more jobs, and that area is booming right now. And there's because of the 5D and all the other things that 5G that we're doing there. The exit from the road you've just mentioned is dangerous. I use that. It's quite close to my house, and I don't know how many near misses I've had there. It is incredibly difficult. So if they can avoid having it, the businesses tend to come and stay and go, whereas residents just come and go all the time. So I think that it's as a business park, it's actually safer than it is with what they have with residential. Also, I've looked at the radioactive material. If you look at the plan that you had before, you can put it up if you want. Right across the railway track, directly across the railway track from that site is Beth Serotronics, is the closest one. They make cobalt bombs and various things like that using radioactive materials. And next to that is Nordion, which also uses radioactive materials. And the thing I sent you, I let you know about that one. It is a problem. And the reason that this business park was put here was partly to give a buffer to Atomic Energy of Canada, which was built at the very beginning of Canada because of the radioactive materials there. And it's mentioned in the city staff report, but they don't give any answer to it. The vacancy rate for businesses right now is low. It's 1.2% for industrial ones. And so taking land out of industrial use right now is not in my mind wise, even anywhere in the city. The drainage is difficult, and there will be others speaking to this, but we've had serious problems just in the last rainstorm with Kissel Creek, which started to seriously erode because the water already there without this even being added. So there is a lot to get done. And they mentioned the staff say they're going to be talking to the NCC and things about the drainage, but they haven't done that yet. You've got the hydro lines that offer a buffer. You've got the construction company that's right next door, which is a noisy kind of construction business, and you're closer to it than really you should be. And I believe somebody from the company will be speaking to you later. And then you talk about need for housing. That's a big push that they're having. We recognize that. So do you. But you just approved 4 major housing projects for over 1,000 units in this meeting already. And a couple weeks ago, months ago, you approved a few others, and there's a whole lot of them. There's about 10 of them under construction right now. We have a huge number of new housing units coming into this area. I estimate there'll be at least 10,000 within the next 5 or 6 years. So we're doing that. So the area was designed industrial for a reason, and it should be stayed that way. So I ask you that you'd reject this zoning, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Marianne. Super helpful, obviously, to me and to everyone that you have always stayed involved here all the way through with me. I really appreciate that. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about, to your last point there, where we have already on this agenda approved 4 applications, and we've approved many more. When you were councillor, you had community consultations, you worked with the community, and usually you came up with a solution. I'm wondering if you can talk about why this one stands out. When we've had success on so many others in coming to agreements with developers, city staff, and the community.
Well, it brings back to the original plan to some extent. For example, Canada North has far more high-rise apartments than anywhere else outside the Greenbelt. And that's because we had designated a town center area. And there are presently, the 9th hall building is being constructed there now, but there's already 8 there. And there's another one under construction, 2 or more under construction that you approved in the spring. There's another application in for more with 30 stories. So there's a very large area of high density housing there. And on top of that, you've approved the and this relates back to some of the things even the city did, the Long March Road with the transit coming, they want to have more there. So there is a 9-story apartment building at the end of Stacy right now on Taron. It's just started construction. They just got the crane up. You have another one on March Road at Klondike, which is I think only 6 or 7 stories. It's under construction now. And there's another one just off of there next just up the street from that one that is in a plan of subdivision, which has some singles as well, but there's an apartment building there as well. So there's a lot. And then the ones you've just approved in the business park, there's a subdivision underway along Terry Fox Drive that's under construction. K&L lands are just, they've got servicing in, they're going to be going ahead soon. All of these were part of the plans from the beginning, or were ones that were added in by expansion lands that the city approved, which the community dealt with at the time that they were made into expansion lands. So this is one where we're taking something that was part of a long-range planning and doesn't fit in. It was the whole principle of having communities, residential communities in Canada, was that they should be integrated with neighborhoods leading to the community itself. And this is outside of any neighborhood, outside of any community. It's also on a street that is already a lot of small businesses on. This is the street where the small businesses go. Not the big ones that you see here about now in Long March Road, but these are smaller ones which people can be able to afford to start the startup companies. A very big area for startups. New building was just opened quite recently that was built on that building that I worked on when I was on council. As you know, it takes a while sometimes for buildings to actually get built, and that's happened now, even during COVID. And there's a program next week in September that they're going to be going over. Terry Matthews has set up an event to talk about what's happening with the business community. And we need to have the business community able to have all sorts of different kinds of buildings. And that was what the plan was. So it's the community will look into the others. They'll make suggestions and ideas and things. They'll criticize some points, but in the end, they'll come up with a solution. This one, we couldn't do that. We've tried. We talked about it a lot. We've had a lot of consultation on it within the community, as well as what the city did. And the city had 2 public meetings on it too, and it still isn't working. And I really think it should stay to be the zoning that's been in place for 50 years, been on every official plan that was ever done. It's still zoned, it hasn't changed yet. It's still zoned industrial. And it is that one, and that road is almost finished. There's only one other spot left on that road to build an industry. So it's not like it's being left forever. I don't think it will be.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Marianne, for explaining all that. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
All right, thank you. Councillor Leeper has a question for you, Marianne.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I'm just taking a look at this property and its proximity to things like transit and amenities. I am all for higher density housing in our suburbs, and the residents of Kitchissippi are asking that density be better distributed right across the ward. And I like to see the density coming to our outside the Greenbelt communities. But I'm trying to understand how this as housing contributes to any kind of, 15, are they going to live in a 15-minute community here? It doesn't look like it. I mean, virtually anything they want to get to is going to require driving.
I think so. The only way out is going out down Stacy. And going down Stacy, by the time you get to Stacy, if you want to go on a bus, going into Ottawa, you can stay on that same side. You don't have to cross it because there's one goes along. It's not an express bus, but there is one that goes along there.
Okay.
But if you want to go to the business park, you got to cross the road, which you've already heard is terrible. And if you want to go to the grocery store, you have to go down there, then you have to cross March Road and come back. So as the crow flies, you're not that far from the grocery store. But if you want to get there, you're going to have to go probably 1.3, 1.4 kilometers.
Yeah.
And not most people don't walk that. Occasionally people do. And there are a few people that walk down. I've seen them walking down from Beaverbrook into it. It used to be right in the center of our community, and it unfortunately moved to the road. But it is not as close as it used to be. And Beaverbrook was a 15-minute community. It was built that way in the first place. And so that is something we really strongly support. But for transit, this is terrible. You're never going to have a bus on Stacy because it doesn't go anywhere. And so you're going to always have to get out to it some other way, whether it's the bus rapid transit or the local transit. Now, and even bus rapid transit won't have for 5 or 10 years anyway. And I mean,
But
it
even
might
just
be
getting
5
to the
years, that's
metro,
uncertain.
even just getting to the metro.
Getting to the metro, you have to go down to Stacy to the end, turn and go over to March Road, and then turn back on March Road to get to it, unless you actually cut across private property. And I don't think we can use that. It might happen. I'm sure it will probably happen. But as long as the citizens would let it happen, then it's okay. But you can't use that as your criteria.
Yep. The traffic congestion, I'm having a little bit more difficulty understanding that as an objection at the corner of Stacy and Taryn.
I wish you would come at 8:30 in the morning when the president, even now, because once schools go back.
So the TIA speaks to 75 cars per hour. So not quite 2 cars a minute, a little over a car a minute coming out
it will
per
take
hour
you
on
maybe,
average.
let's
Is
put
that
it this
really going
way,
to add that much?
Oh, yeah. Right now, what's happening, you can wait in line for 10 or 15 minutes to get through that intersection. And every time you do, you're taking your life in your hands in rush hour. It's okay with a rush hour. In the morning rush hour is the worst. That's when the schools are the same timing as people going to work. And you've heard about the schools, they come out there. One school driver told me that she drives special needs kids to schools and she has to go from one to the other. So she'd come along Tarrant Road and she'd be able to turn up Stacy because the traffic was going the other way to get to the school to drop her kid off. But then she had to come back off to go to another school. And she told me that took a minimum of 20 minutes. And it's about 300 meters, maybe 400. Because what happens is Tarrant turns to 3 lanes there.
Yep.
The left turn lane turns left onto March Road, and that goes to the business park. So there's a lot of traffic in the morning going that way.
Okay.
The straight ahead one goes down to Carling Avenue across the way, and it takes a few people in that part of the business park. It's not nearly as much used.
Okay.
And then the right turn lane turns right on March Road to get to the Queensway. So some people do that. If you want to go into the Queensway in the morning, the only thing the city did, because they know it's a failed intersection, they put up a sign saying don't block the intersection. Well, some people still don't do that, so you can come across, but that's the first lane because that's the left turn lane. Then the center lane that's going through has more space because fewer people are on it, and you can't even see if they're coming most of the time. If there's a bus there, you can't see them at all. So you sort of inch your way out, and if that's clear, then you inch your way a little bit forward to see if somebody's coming on the other lane. And I tried to get the city to put a secondary traffic light there just to give us that and tie it to the one on March Road. It's very, very close. And I say, well, it's too close to another intersection.
Right.
Which it is, but it's very dangerous. And people wanting to go into the business park by bus, the closest stop for them to go is the one on Tarrant Road that's not too far from that intersection. Then you have to cross those 3 lanes of traffic in rush hour.
Now, if this were developed as the larger plan calls for as business park, as light industrial business uses, would it be any different?
Yeah, it would, because in the morning, people will be coming into the business park, not going out. And that's when the worst part of that problem is there.
So it's
and most of the businesses we have there do not have huge numbers of employees. But there is more traffic going in and out for that, but it's not heavy. I know a new one depends on what business goes there, obviously, and how many people they have, etc. But if it's like the others that are there now, it wouldn't be a big problem. And because they're the opposite direction to what the people getting out from there or out from the school are going, it minimizes the impact on that intersection.
Okay. No, I've got some significant sympathy for rejecting this application. I'm struggling to understand how we're serving residents of these future buildings by zoning this for housing. All right.
That's the concern that the community also has. I thank you for raising that, Jeff, because we like people who like living in Canada. We like them to be our neighbors and things. And we certainly are doing the identification very much more so than any other place outside the Greenbelt. I mean, the ones you approved today, 3 of them are high-rise apartments.
Yeah.
Only the 4th one is having some singles. And we have families out here. They need a few singles and townhouses. But we're getting more and more and more apartments. And nice ones, but also some less expensive ones. Virgil already has built some in Canada.
Yep.
Of the same sort of as this one, but they're right on a route that has some bus service. And so I think it's on a more major, it's on Canada Avenue near Terry Fox. So it's a place where you can get in and out much more easily than this one. And they also have land up March Road, which they could build on right now. It's on the expansion lands. And they wanted apartments in that one, and the apartments in that expansion lands are on Brazil's property.
Okay. Marianne, it's always good to see you. I hope you're having a great summer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and you too.
Thanks. Just quickly before I let you go, obviously we just went through an official plan process. This property, you know, when it comes down to it from a staff perspective, in terms of evaluating this property, it's located within the general urban area. It's right up against the general employment area. Over the years, if the vision was always to have this site developed as industrial and not residential, why not push to have that line shifted a few hundred meters, and then you wouldn't have to worry about this application coming forward?
That was in the report that I sent around. It was designated industrial right up until the new city of Ottawa came into place. It was part of the business park. And if you look at the map that shows all the business ones that they showed in the thing there, you'll notice that it's like if you take the park at the edge part on further south down here around town, should be included in it. But they actually changed several areas within the business.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole.
Well, in 2003 or 4, they actually changed the designation of parts of the Canada North Business Park, not just this one, other parts as well, to general urban. Just because they thought it'd be good to have maybe some housing or something there, but they didn't realize that with what the new official plan is doing, it is allowing it to go in any part of the business park. And the two plans that you approved at this meeting for the Nokia property and the Brook Street Park are going to add about 8 different high-rise apartments in a place near the transit. And that's far better than this one. So this one should never have been taken out of industrial, but it was. And that, I don't know why they did it, because I wasn't on council at the time. It was just before I came back on council, but it didn't make any sense then, and it doesn't make any sense now. But industrial lands are allowed in general urban too. And at least that's what, so it's still a legitimate use of the property, even with that designation. I would rather have it industrial.
Right. My point is merely that as a general urban designated area, it certainly makes it a lot easier for an application to come forward and to be approved or to be recommended for approval by staff. And also, should it get appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, it really comes down to what that designation is. I mean, sure, it was done in 2003, but we also approved official plan reviews in 2008 and 2013. So opportunities were there to address this over the years.
I think we just didn't pay enough attention to it because we thought it was okay because the zoning was still there.
Yeah.
Okay. And the zoning did not change when those official plans were changed. It's been stayed as a zone for industrial use continuously right to this day. And maybe we should make a change on that, but that will have to be done after this application is dealt with, obviously.
Yeah, we have that change. That change at this point is irrelevant because the application is in front of us. So thank you.
Another property in there too, though.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Thank you, Marianne. And no other questions. So we'll move on to our next speaker, Catherine Roberts, followed by Andrew Karen, Gail Curry, and Jean Cody.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. And I'm wondering if I could get the slides put up, please.
Yeah, we'll get those up. We'll just.
I want my clock to restart then.
Okay. Don't worry about your clock. Bro.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Actually, you could change next slide, please. I am presenting today because I do not agree with the modeling results used in the transportation impact assessment to justify the recommendation in favor of the proposed zoning change. The TIA report goes into very little detail concerning the Stacy-Tarrant intersection. This intersection is an unsignaled T intersection, which is approximately 55 meters from Tarrant March intersection. The conclusion contained in the TIA states that, quote, There are no operational issues detected at this intersection, end quote. This is a critical error in the report, as the main justification for this conclusion is the result of the Syncro-10 traffic modeling software. Slide. According to the Syncro-10 report included in the TIA appendices, the 95th percentile queue length at Stacy Tarrant in peak morning is 5.9 meters, or approximately 1 car length. This is blatantly in error. As shown, this photo was taken September 2019 from Google Maps. We're looking at a queue of 6 cars waiting to enter the Stacy Tarrant intersection to turn left. It is worth noting that this queue is not conclusively a result of a backup of cars waiting to turn left onto March Road from Tarrant. Slide. The second photo, taken June 2019, shows the traffic queue eastbound on Tarrant Road in the northbound turn lane to March Road. Again, you can see the queue length of Stacy vehicles waiting to turn left onto Tarrant, and it is much more than 5.9 meters. Please keep in mind that according to the TIA, the new development will almost double the traffic at the Stacy Tarrant intersection in the critical morning peak. Slide. The third photo was taken within moments of the previous picture with a view from a different vantage point. Please note the long queue of vehicles stretching down Tarrant Road, as I would like to point out that the Syncro analysis in existing conditions indicates that the 95th percentile queue length of the northbound lane movement at Tarrant March is approximately 260 meters during morning peak hour. Slide. This next photo was taken again within moments of the previous 2 pictures, showing the line of traffic. This queue patch stretches beyond the 1131, 1151 Tarrant Road development and slightly past Chisholm Court. The length of this queue is approximately 550 meters, over half a kilometer, which is well past Syncro's 260 meter. Concerns regarding Syncro's ability to accurately model closely spaced intersections such as Stacy Tarrant and Tarrant March have been raised by the City of Toronto's Transportation Services Division. Their document entitled Guidelines for Using Syncro 9, including SimTraffic 9, dated March 18, 2016 states, methods such as Syncro do not account for the potential impact of downstream congestion on intersection operations. The TIA suggests that any challenges at the Stacy Tarrant intersection are primarily triggered by the capacity limitations at the Tarrant March intersection. Although this may not be entirely correct, since the first photo that I showed you shows that even light traffic on Tarrant can produce significant queues on Stacy. The potential options listed in the TIA to mitigate the Tarrant March capacity issue do not clearly solve the problem in a timely manner. Slide. So why is all of this important for the rezoning of 100 Stacy? All traffic coming from the development must either go on Alfred Casson Way and pass by 1 or 2 schools, or through the Stacy Tarrant intersection. If Stacy Tarrant is blocked or has an excessive queue, the schools will see an increase in traffic and a decrease in safety to students. Slide. It is clear that there are operational issues at the Stacy Tarrant intersection. The city must focus on mitigating these issues and accurately model the impact before moving forward with this zoning change and subsequent development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Councillor Moffat. Thank you, Catherine. In the theme of a picture's worth 1,000 words, that was extremely helpful to show that, because that is the reality. I guess I just want to say to you, and all of this was taken before we have the building at Tarrant in March, which is also in your photos, but it's just a field right now, and the one that's coming on Weeping Willow. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts on some of those traffic predictions when those buildings will go up.
I can see the traffic is only going to get worse at that point. I also have some questions regarding the assumptions used in the models. I'm not convinced that, they didn't convince me that those were the correct assumptions. They weren't backed up. But with more traffic entering from the Tarrant development, it's going to be going right into right into that line of traffic, that over half kilometer queue. So that's just going to add there and cause some issues. As far as Weeping Willow is concerned, that was not even included in the TIA. So what the TIA shows is it doesn't include the extra traffic.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you very much for taking the time to put that together, because it's super helpful for people to see what's really going on there. It's one thing to look at it just on a general map, but when you see the photos, very helpful. Thank you very much, Catherine.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time here today, Catherine. So I have to go back because I initially said that Robert McCauley wasn't here. Robert McCauley was actually in the waiting room, but disguised under a different name. So we do have Robert McCauley here, and I will ask him to join us now. Mr. McCauley, can you hear us? Are you there?
He seems to be muted, Chair.
Okay. Well, hopefully he unmutes himself and we can carry on.
Hello.
Oh, there we
Hello.
go.
Sorry, thank you for giving me some time. Apologize for the mistake earlier. I had computer problems, so I had to use a colleague's computer. I'm not Diane. But a lot of my points have already been covered by previous speakers. But I'll just stress maybe one or two points here. Going into this call, the view of the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association, which I'm representing here as a director, was that this application was premature for the residential proposal. It's presented as a transit-oriented design with provisions and allowances for transportation consistent with adequate transit and road access already in place for this site. Neither of these are the case today, as you've heard already, nor are they planned for the near future. The BRT completion date will be post 2031, if not later. And the failed intersection that you just heard Catherine talk about in detail is a reality too. So again, this is premature for the purposes as presented by the applicant. I think this application should be refused until such time as the City of Ottawa provides adequate transportation, either road and or transit for this site. I think that's all I could add that's new. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions for you, Mr. McCauley. We'll start with Laura Dudas. Councillor Dudas. I don't know why I always do that.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note, I've been listening to yourself and the other presenters, Catherine, before you, and this is so reminiscent of the community that I serve, one of the communities I serve in Bradley Estates, where development is forthcoming in tidal waves, and yet the infrastructure can't keep up because it's just not there. And that's having a massive impact on quality of life in those who live there. And there's promises of BRTs and there's promises of infrastructure improvements, and yet we are, years and years away from seeing any of that in these communities. And I just wanted to thank you for being here. I wanted to thank Catherine before for showing those images, but I wanted to ask, once again, being not in close proximity to amenities such as shops and things like that, having constant traffic congestion, not being close to BRT, I'm assuming that increasing the residential impact on your community is only going to have an impact on quality of life of those who already live there. And I was just wondering if you can kind of elaborate a little bit more on your experiences in that circumstance.
I think that's a very good point. We're putting development, we're approving developments without having the infrastructure already there. And it's very disruptive to install an enhanced road or transit after the fact when you're not dealing with a greenfields project. Like if we talk about part of the Canada North proposals that are on the table is the Canada North Tech Park, which has a fairly massive multifunctional proposal that's being developed. And it's a great idea, but it's going to increase the number of travelers by a large number without having access into Canada north, either by March Road or Carling, which are the main two opportunities, until those are upgraded. And how do you upgrade them without tearing them up and taking them out of use at the worst possible time? So I don't know. I guess it's just, it's a bit of planning, looking backwards and saying, why didn't we do this in a different way? But I think it does identify the need for a more proactive approach. And I don't even think that looking for the BRT or the LRT is to solve some of these problems, because it has to be sort of neighborhood-centric transit that's reliable and timely to get people out of their cars so that we can reduce some of this load on the roads, which I don't think are ever going to catch up, regardless of whether you're in an EV or the cars we have today. Anyway, that's just my thought, Laura. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. I think it's important that it's a chicken and egg situation, right? Infrastructure first or building houses first. And sometimes it melds better than others. And sometimes maybe infrastructure catches up a couple of years later. But as I'm seeing from this application, you're talking about years from now, and this application is asking for development now. And I'm eager to ask staff some questions, but I'm at the mindset right now that this shouldn't go forward. So thank you very much for your time, Robert. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And now we go to Councillor Curry.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks, Rob, very much. I know Neil Thompson, the chair of the Beaverbrook Community Association, was helping you with this, and some of the conversations we had, similar to what Councillor Dudas was saying, was that the assumptions about the transportation are the problem. And I wondered if you had any further comment on that, because we keep hearing 2038, but then sometimes we hear 2041. Sometimes we hear, well, there's no date because we're dependent on LRT, BRT, widening of March Road. I wonder if you had any other comment on those other assumptions.
Just to say that Neil and I have talked about the Transportation Master Plan, which seems to be a document that's been in preparation for some time, but I personally haven't seen much coming out of that would make me more confident that the future is going to be better than the past. Because it really is looking out probably 30 years or more than just 5 years, but a long time to be able to make those decisions with good forecasting tools. So is there a transportation master plan that's coming along that would cover off all this stuff and give developers a better handle on what they're trying to deal with as well?
It's coming, but it's not here yet, but hence the assumptions. Thank you very much, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Mr. McCauley.
Thank you.
Back to our list. Our next speaker is Andrew Karen.
Good day to you, and thanks very much for giving so much attention to this proposal. I appreciate that you've got a lot on your slate these days, and you guys put an awful lot of work into looking after our community, and it's much appreciated. I sent a short list of a few points, and I think many of these have been tackled, but I think the umbrella point is the readiness of the infrastructure for this development and what this development will be like for folks living in it. It's a very high density development. It's not a huge land plot, and the buildings aren't that huge, but 258 residences in this size. Brazil has told us in the past that they're looking at a lot of studio apartments, one-bedroom apartments in this. But I think it's just heading to be a stranded development if it goes ahead. The alternative, of course, is that other proposals may come across to add to that same area. I had a number of points about infrastructure. The city's own staff have pointed out there's a problem with water supply, and that this proposal would have to be accompanied with some sort of upgrade on water supply to meet firefighting requirements, if I understand that correctly. Marianne Wilkinson made the point about stormwater drainage, and I was one of the people who was unable to make my regular walk around the beaver pond for a week or more a couple of weeks ago because of the big rain dump, all of which is feeding into the same Gazelle drain as many other developments. And I know the NCC has problems with that. And this is just one more that's going to throw water into it. The transportation side, I'm very disappointed. We've been around this boy for so long. Previous councillor Jenna Sudds held a consultation on this in February of 2021. And the same TIA was available then, and a lot of, that's transportation infrastructure assessment. And a lot of the same questions that we're hearing today were raised then. There was a lot of, I think, disingenuous stuff about the proximity of the future BRT and how close the supermarket is and the drugstore across the street. But the developer has no proposals to make a pedestrian access other than, as we mentioned, this long walk down the length of Stacy and around to it. The developer also says that sort of intentionally they're going to limit parking to 0.8 spots per residence to force people to use public transit. I think all that's going to result in is a lot of cars that are looking for on-street parking or parking in the parking lots of the industry buildings there. But to come back to this walk down Stacy Drive, which I've made quite a few times, in the summertime, it's quite pleasant. You've got a nice open spaces on one side or lots of shrubs. Different prospect on a winter's night when you're walking back from the bus stop on this windswept area, poorly lit. And I think a lot of people think that's a safety hazard that they're not prepared to commit themselves to. So the proponent is great on putting this forward as part of a 15-minute development. It really is not. And I think this would result in a stranded development that would be crying out for the city to do things to improve it, and therefore put the city at a lot of expense to respond to a development that size in this stranded location. So I think I'll stop there and take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Karen. Any questions for delegation? Councillor Curry?
Thank you, Andrew, very much for coming. I'm not sure if there's another presentation, but I'm going to ask you this question because you started as well with the flooding of the Beaver Pond. And I don't know that councillors understand what's happened in Canada. It's not like I've been out running around telling people. But I was wondering if you had a more fulsome comment on the flooding that we just experienced that is really close to where this property is, that the impacts will be seen and are seen.
Yeah, well, it could be seen on one of Molly Smith's slides there that the Gazelle drain runs roughly north-south at the western edge of this development. And I believe, and I don't have chapter and verse on this, but the Canada Northlands Phase 9 has taken an awful long time to develop because of the concerns of the NCC about that whole infrastructure. The Gazelle drain feeds into Watts Creek flows down to Shirley's Bay and out into the Ottawa River. And there have been big questions about the capacity for that. And just as a first-hand example, that big rainstorm we had, I think 2 weekends ago, it was the following Friday that I was attempting to walk around the Beaver Pond. The footpaths were still flooded. The Beaver Pond was probably elevated 1.5 meters from its normal level, and the Gazelle drain was in full spate, presumably trying to drain what was there. And this is before the full build out of the KNL Zone 9 completes, which is only, and that is already committed to throwing more water into the Gazelle drain. And this development with its own stormwater pond is relying on that same outlet. I'm not a water engineer, but it just looks as though it's going to be a problem.
Thank you very much for that. I just wanted to make that point because it'll be something I have to say in my closing points as well. Thanks, Andrew.
Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. And thank you, Mr. Karen. So we have 2 more delegations. Next up is Gail Curry, followed by Jane Cody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. The planning department approved this zoning bylaw amendment for 100 Stacy Drive. As they stated, it represents good planning and adherence to both the official plan and provincial policy statement. We disagree, as we feel the planning department has failed to successfully substantiate how the various policies support this rezoning application. Given the time I'm allowed to speak, I'll not be able to quote all the various sections of these governing policies. Instead, I'll highlight the significant points. First, the planning department states that the site is close to transit on March Road. As we've heard from past presenters, this is not true. This site is over 900 meters from any bus stop on March Road. There's no BRT planned until well after 2035, and there is poor bus service on weekends and evenings. 100 Stacy Drive is not located in an intensification target area for good reason. It's not on an arterial road, it's not within the required distance to transit, and it's not near the Canada Town Centre. When dealing with intensification of this magnitude, these are important planning factors that are not met by this application. Concerning site parking, the planning department reduced, as Andrew Karen just talked about, the minimum parking rate from 1.2 to 0.8 per dwelling unit, and states in their decision, I'm quoting from their document now, reduced parking is an effective way of getting residents to consider other travel options and to encourage transit use. However, to encourage transit use, one must be close to a transit site. This site is not. Hope is not a method nor a planning principle. The lived reality and the facts of this site's location must be clearly understood and remain central to any rezoning decision by the city. Furthermore, it is unsafe to walk to March Road on this poorly lit dead-end street with no sidewalk, no lights, and no neighbors. Because remember, this is in an IP6 zone, and the reality is businesses on Stacy Drive are pretty much deserted evenings and weekends. So it's not close to March Road, and it's just not safe to walk to March Road. Second, the density of this intensification, which could potentially mean over 500 people, is grossly disproportionate to the adjacent low-density residential and industrial communities. The official plan makes it clear that the city, and I'm quoting, will continue to regulate the location, scale, and type of land use, end quote, and goes on to state the city supports, quote, intensification in a manner that enhances and complements the desirable characteristics of the many existing communities that make up this city, end quote. This level of density will disrupt forever and alter the community character by the disproportionate number of people proposed for this site relative to the number of people living in the adjacent communities. This rezoning application assumes this level of intensification is acceptable and somehow can be seamlessly integrated into the adjacent low-density communities. It cannot. This rezoning will have an adverse impact on the way we work, live, and play in this community. Intensification does not fit within the context of these R1 and IP6 low density communities. Third, and lastly, planning department state that this rezoning application, and I'm quoting, fits within the existing and planned context and is compatible with surrounding land uses, end quote. This is not true. This proposal is not compatible with the local character of the area. The official plan states, and I'm quoting, compatible development means development that, although it is not necessarily the same as or similar to existing buildings in the vicinity, can enhance an established community and can coexist without causing undue adverse impact on surrounding properties. So being compatible with is not the same as being the same as. Being compatible implies nothing more than being capable of existing together in harmony. Harmony means balancing development against contextual fit. Does it fit well with its physical context and work well with the existing planned vision of the adjacent communities? We say no. We argue that this rezoning is incompatible and does not enhance the adjacent low density, low light, low noise, low impact IP6 and R1 communities of Beaverbrook, Canada Lakes. This rezoning application does not sufficiently balance intensification with integration into the existing communities. This current zoning mix of IP6 and R1 communities have had no adverse effects on either community for decades. We have and continue to live in harmony, and that's good planning. In closing, Beaverbrook and the Canada Lakes Association do not support this rezoning application, nor do the past and present councillors for this ward, Marianne Wilkinson, MP Genocides, along with Councillor Kathy Curry. We urge the committee to reject this rezoning application as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just a quick question on your comments that the area is deserted in evenings and weekends. How is that a negative to a residential development? Because if the concern is that people can't get around safely, if you're saying that there's less traffic in the evenings and weekends when residents would be in their homes and making their way around the community, I don't see that as a negative. I mean, the metro's open every night.
Well, if I were to walk down Stacy Drive at night as a woman, as a retired social worker who has worked in ending violence against women, I can tell you not being able to have access to anyone if I am in trouble is a negative, and it's not safe. If I walk on my street in Beaverbrook, there are many, many houses that I can run to. That's not the case because this is an industrial zone.
Okay. Councillor Leeper?
Thanks. So I think, Gail, it's important to understand what undue impacts or undue adverse impacts you're purporting this development would have if it moves ahead. I've heard a lot about the traffic congestion at the corner of Tarrant and March and that interchange. What are the other undue adverse impacts it would have in Beaverbrook, say?
Well, light pollution for one, over 500, well, over 258 apartments with all their lights on. Noise. This is a very quiet community, and again, the harmony that we have with our business communities, we have a certain profile of density, of noise, so it would dramatically change. This is if you've not been out to the site, it's a small park where people walk their dogs, their footpaths in Beaverbrook, and where the IP6 workers take their walks at lunch. We have a daycare on Stacy Drive, and they take all the little kids out to our little footpaths. So it's just the mass, the density, the lights at all times of day, night and day, because this is a car community. I mean, we're talking about, according to the report that Brazil puts out, which I think their math is wrong on page 7 of Molly's report. When I do the math, it says 242 underground parking spots. So, we're not kidding ourselves. This is a car community right now. And so lights coming down all through the night, noise, depending on who's going to be the residents of these two buildings, it's just going to forever change. We move to these communities and we understand and accept development. We're not anti-development at all. But these communities have lived in harmony because we have similar profiles.
Wow. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Councillor Curry.
I just wanted to thank Gail for coming out. She's made all the points there in a row, and I really appreciate your time, Gail.
Thank you.
All right, from one Curry to another. So we will now go to our last speaker. Thank you, Gail. Appreciate your time today. Our last speaker on this, which is Jane Cody. Reminds me that I keep on talking about R1 zone a lot. I just reminded that Canada is the only suburb that has R1 zoning, oddly enough. Okay, Jane, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much, Chair, for permitting me to speak on behalf of Cody Construction today, which is located at 40 Station Road. And the first thing I would like to step up with is the classification that Molly had brought forward. City of Ottawa have never once in 40 years addressed Cody Construction located on this 40 Station Road with information Nothing in writing to state that Cody Construction would have been classed as Class 1 industrial. When we go through the, as a company, when we go through what we now can see much better, we feel that Class 2 should have been where we sat, just because of what happens and what works with our company. We currently work with Nordion, and we can go back to 1970 when Cody Construction moved in onto the commercial industrial zoned area with the purchase of this of our property. And we work along with what was Atomic Energy, Nordion, Best Medical, and have worked in the high tech industry since that time span. So that's the first start of classification. So without direct communication from City of Ottawa to our company, we're sitting here with why would we be a Class 1 when we should have been a Class 2? We are industrial. We are we work with, as an example, wood products daily. We have wood products that we process, and with equipment running daily, and the businesses that start up their day, we would have a significant impact as a total group on the thought of this building, potential building, going in on the application that's there. So we look back and back in time, and we say, you know what, over the last 40 years, the lack of maintenance that has come down Station Road has existed. And I mean, between Nordion and Cody Construction, they are the ones that have been basically keeping that road viable for use. If there are changes, I mean, the roadway will need to be brought up to proper specifications in the future due to an influx of commercial properties, if it's permitted to grow in the areas of expansion on Station Road. So without someone truly driving up and down and looking to see what's there, there are still some issues. Drainage has been a large problem since the 1970s, and over the years, due to poor maintenance, ditching, requirements for sewer and water expansion, it's created an artesian well at the city-owned railway property line and Brazil Construction. So the railway and access crossing has been flooded numerous times. So that's just adding to what other people have also mentioned. And you know what, without having the proper items pulled together as far as our zoning for Cody Construction, which should be Class 2 industrial, which also brings forth the 300-meter potential, which would change the proposal right from the beginning, in a sense. I think that we should be able to communicate in a better fashion on this, because we are industrial, we are there to stay. We wish to be in that area. We work with Canada Research Park. We work with MDS Nordion, now known as BWXT, on one portion of that building, and Algonquin College. We have hydro trucks, 6, 8, 10 at a time, located on our property that are staying overnight and parking their vehicles, and then they're out in the mornings if that's something that is of interest to anyone. K-Line has been in and out of our property, and to say that we are Class 1 is not right. So I think there's a little bit of assistance that we need as a company, but I'm hopeful that this proposal is just pushed completely back and completely away. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Cody. A question for you from Councillor Curry.
Yes. I just want to say thanks, Jane, for describing that, because I wasn't sure if Cody Construction was going to be here to be represented today, but I just want to say thank you very much for explaining exactly what the neighbors are to this, so that the committee can understand that. So I really appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry, and thank you, Ms. Cody. Seeing no further questions. So We will then go back now to the applicant for questions. I misspoke. There is R1 and other suburbs, but it's Canada is where it proliferates. Not that anyone cares to hear me correct myself or talk about irrelevant things. So just wait here as the applicant streams back into the room. Or not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we have a question from Councillor Gower to kick things off.
Thank you, Chair. It's about pathways and sidewalks and so on. I was just looking at Google Maps and doing some measurements. As the crow flies, this site is actually really close to a lot of community amenities. It's 1.2 kilometers from the Richcraft Recreation Center. It's 490 meters from a Metro grocery store, and it's 500 meters from George Vanier School. But as one of the presenters pointed out, to actually get there is difficult because there's no direct pathways, there's no sidewalk. It seems to me that this location would actually be really favorable if you could add another sidewalk along Stacy and maybe a couple of strategically located pathways or MUPs to create some better connections, safer connections for pedestrians. I was wondering with the applicant, has the applicant explored any opportunities with some of the neighboring landowners or with the city around securing some easements or potential access for additional public pathways in this area?
Yeah, through the chair, I can speak partially on that answer. I can speak of the pathways on site. We have been in discussions with the City Parks Department for about 2 years now. It actually turns out that multi-use pathway is actually on Bridgeville's property. So the pathway that many people like to enjoy out there does actually cross Bridgeville's property. And as part of this application, we have agreed with Real Estate and Parks Department to make that trail formal and actually have that dedicated to the city. So that multi-use pathway is actually private property that many enjoy. The shortcut over the railway corridor is not being supported by Bridgeville nor the city for obvious reasons. So that shortcut is not sending anybody towards Station Road. That is basically not a safe route. I do have Bridgeville representatives on call as well. They had in the past tried to reach out to some of the owners. Again, most of the buildings adjacent to us are tenants, so there hasn't been any success in terms of securing any easements, and it's very unlikely that any of those private landowners, developers would support a pedestrian easement crossing their property. So at the time being, Stacy Drive is the direct cycling, automobile and pedestrian link to those areas that you're mentioning. So it would not be cutting through any of those private businesses. We see, if you look at Google Earth and if you go visit the site, you see where residents do use the lands. But again, we cannot promote those or say that those are the true walking distances, because that's not true. There's no easements for those. But we will be securing that multi-use pathway that many do enjoy. And again, as this is rezoning, we're looking at basically the change of use in terms of long-term implications. The short-term implications of this will be looked at in an updated TIA as part of the site plan. So again, this is not supporting development at this time more than just the land use. And as we've indicated, we actually have provided replies back to some of the speakers today. In the past couple of days, we did our traffic engineer, who's not able to be on this call today, has provided written responses to many of the requests provided by many of the speakers today. And we also have city staff who can speak about the TIA. So I don't know if Bridgeville I believe Jean-Luc and Phil Tabat are on the call as well, but that has come up in the past, this question, and the answer that we had was no, that there is no short-term answers in terms of securing easements.
Thank you. Is that it, Councillor Gower?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a follow-up on the same topic for staff, but I mean, regardless of what happens here, I hope that you continue those conversations, because obviously better pathways, better sidewalk connections would be a benefit to each one of those businesses as well. And I could see even just a line down the rail corridor past the Purelator to Carling Avenue would be beneficial to the perhaps this future development, perhaps the businesses, and even some of the older streets in Beaverbrook, like Kimmins. That's a court that's very distant by foot to anything. So I think those can still be explored.
I take it.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you, Mark, for your time here today.
Thank you, Chair.
And now we will move to questions to staff. Councillor Gower.
Okay, I'm on a roll. I'll keep going. The rail corridor, who owns that? What are the long-term plans currently for that rail corridor? Could it be turned into a pathway at some point?
Thanks for the question. It's owned by Nylene, and the applicant has had discussions with them. It's an active rail corridor, so there's no plans to decommission it at the moment.
Mr. Chair, if I may offer a quick point of clarification. The rail corridor is owned by the city. We have enjoyed a long-term lease with Nylene where they are responsible for maintenance and management of the corridor. We are currently in discussions with them about renewing that lease on a long-term basis. But at this point in time, there has been no exploration of turning that into a pathway, and likely would not happen unless Nylene were to vacate the corridor and no longer take on the responsibilities for management and maintenance of it.
Okay, thank you. For Stacy and the potential sidewalk, does that appear anywhere in the city's future plans for sidewalk upgrade on either side or both sides of the street?
It would be certainly contemplated during a site plan application.
Okay, that's good. And the intersection that we've heard so much about today at Stacy and Tarrant, is that on any current city plans for improvements?
I can speak to that, Chair. There is no current plan to do any major work at Stacy and Tarrant, but I suspect that when the March Road bus rapid transit, which is currently slated for 2031, which is the most up-to-date information I have from my colleagues in transportation planning, I suspect that intersection will be reviewed for any possible changes, because as the TIA states, it's closely linked to March Road intersection. So those two almost work in tandem.
And do any of the nearby pathways or roads, have any of those made it to the missing links consultation? And in terms of the active transportation plan that's going to come to council, I think in 2023, have any of the streets or pathways or sidewalks that we've been talking about today been flagged as potential candidates for the missing links or active transportation plan when that's updated?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but it should be simple enough to look into that. But it's a fair question.
I just wonder if it's even possible to get them added, because it certainly hasn't been approved by council. So if there's a good case to make for it, could be a route there.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Last question for policy staff, perhaps. Could projects like a sidewalk along Stacy be an eligible community benefits charge project? We're going to be talking about that in a few minutes.
I can answer that one. Sorry. Hi, it's Alison Hamlin. I'm the acting manager in Development Review West. And yeah, we'll be talking about community benefits charge later on in the meeting. It would have to be listed in the community benefits strategy in order to be considered as a project that could go towards that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't, in all my measurements, I didn't mention the length of Stacy to Tarrant. I'm not sure. It looks like it's probably less than a kilometer. Would seem like through one of these policy programs that we have, active transportation plan update, community benefits charges, there's got to be a realistic route to find a way to create a safer passage for pedestrians for a development like this. And staff had mentioned site plan. I guess this is one of our frustrations now as councillors, is that we can say, well, we'll do it in site plan, but as councillors, we don't have that same certainty of oversight that we might have had just a few months ago with the new Bill 109. So thanks, Chair. That's it for me.
Chair, if I may add, There is an existing pathway along Kimmins Court that goes all the way down to Taryn. There just isn't a city sidewalk itself, but there is a pathway that links to the Stacy site down to Taryn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the MUP that's on the west side, right? So is that winter maintained at all?
I'd have to confirm.
Yeah, because obviously that's your fundamental difference, right? So if there's a sidewalk on Stacy, that's all of a sudden it's available 12 months of the year, whereas the MUP would not be if it's not maintained. But it does exist; it is there. It's just a matter of, you know, is it maintained? Is that a year-round facility for residents to be able to use? Thank you. So, Councillor Menard, you're up next. Get off Reddit.
Reddit and Twitter, both bad things. We got to vote better here, and then I won't be on there. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say there's some things here that I can appreciate, and staff have kind of dispensed, I think, with some concerns. There's a future BRT here in the area. The zoning amendment in terms of the height that seems okay, and there's a 5-meter difference between the homes that are set back in the south. Given the distance from the site, shouldn't be any major impact. But I did have some concerns, some legitimate concerns around this application, similar to Councillor Gower was saying. And it's mainly around the connections and the infrastructure that are not there, and so it's an awkward kind of fit for apartment buildings. For land that was zoned industrial, there really should be sidewalks here, and the sidewalk should directly connect to March Road. It seems a very circuitous path around industrial sites and through the parking lots to get to March Road. And I think if we want to put housing here, we should be doing somewhat of the bare minimum, right, to work to make sure that the surrounding infrastructure facilities are of high use. As it stands, it seems that the site will be more dedicated to kind of car use, and that's not what we're trying to plan. Again, in our official plan, it seems to not jive as much with what we're trying to do with 15-minute communities and infrastructure to support that in all communities in Ottawa. And so I just wonder our staff's comment on that. Is there more of a plan and a study to come on pedestrian and cyclist use through this area, or is it, as it stands right now, going to be built the way we're seeing it in front of us? What's the future plans around those pieces?
As part of the zoning amendment, there aren't future plans for a cycling or pedestrian connection to the site, other than what already exists.
And I mean, in staff's opinion, is what exists now conducive to 15-minute communities and what we're trying to build in the OP with the development here?
Yeah, it was our determination that the proposal fits within a 15-minute neighborhood. It's in close proximity. It is under a kilometer from existing transit stations, which are planned to be improved. And there are amenities such as grocery stores and services and institutional uses within a 15-minute walk.
Okay, and the issue of the proximity to radioactive materials, is there more that you can give us on that? Just concerns or dangers or future threat assessment there?
Yeah. So the Ministry of Environment D6 guidelines analysis of compatibility was conducted to assess if sensitive land uses are appropriate adjacent to Class 1 and Class 2 uses. So using the ministry guidelines, the adjacent property at 40 Station Road was classified as Class 1, and further north, Nordion and the other industrial use, which Nordion is a pharmaceutical facility, they're considered Class 2. So in the analysis, it found that the proposal should have the minimum separation distance of 20 meters from 40 Station, and the proposal is outside of the Class 2 area of influence, which is 300 meters. And to determine a Class 1 use, it was determined based on the information found on the business and the current zoning. So the current zoning being business park industrial, it is adjacent to other sensitive land uses such as public parks and residential uses. And that was used to determine that it was a class 1 use and it'd be able to operate in close proximity to sensitive land uses.
Okay, thank you for that. Just something that popped out that I wanted to ask more about. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like I say, I have some concerns with this, but also some other things that I think will work here. I guess the bigger one is just the lack of sort of a public planning process first on this, with a private planning process coming to us first instead. Because if the area was going to be switched over to residential, it would have been nice to identify that earlier and have associated amenities prepared for when that occurs, rather than this process, which is kind of backwards. And so, I mean, I don't know if Councillor Curry might have a motion to defer to maybe go back and do some more work with the public planning process on this. I'd be willing to support it, deferral to go look again at some of these pieces and how the city service infrastructure might be able to support something like this. If not, I will support the application, but it's with those concerns that I think deferral might be in order. So just leave that with Councillor and staff. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you. I've been listening in, and I find this interesting because this is similar to some things that are happening in my ward, and that is like a dead-end street and a bunch of residential in an area that wasn't residential before, and the infrastructure's not there, and I'm worried about the pattern of that. I want to ask a question to Mr. Moody about the rail line. I'm not sure if I was clear if that could possibly be a pathway in the future, because it's obviously very close by, but just checking on that.
So Councillor and Chair, the current status of that railway is in fact an operating railway. We do have long-term leases in place, and it's subject to renewal. We're in the discussions, the corporate real estate office, which, as you may be aware, I'm familiar with still, has been in discussions with respect to renewing that long-term lease. The terms of that lease place the onus for all maintenance and operations on the tenant, which in this case is Nylene Industries, and that generates a significant cost savings and value to the city. So with respect to it someday becoming a pathway, it's not within any current plans to pursue that. It's not identified within the transportation master plan as a project within the affordable network concept, nor is there funding identified for it. So that was the rationale for my answer. Of course, if it should become the will of council to pursue that through the transportation master plan or incorporate funding for that within budgets or the background study for the development charges, that could change in the future. But at this point in time, it isn't a planned work.
Okay, thank you, and that's good to point out. But there has been pointed out by other questioners is the lack of pedestrian cycle infrastructure that's already there for such a project, and that's what concerns me, that it doesn't even seem to be planned to be after the fact. I have a lot of concerns about that, and I see this as a pattern. As I said, I have applications coming up that have the similar problems. So is it, like, for example, when we talk about the MUP, is it possible it could become winter maintained?
The typical standard for winter maintenance on multi-use pathways is to provide lighting. If you do look at the air photos, there's a considerable network of multi-use pathways that are, in the adjacent to or connected to this site. But they are typically not winter maintained from a pedestrian's perspective in this site, and we typically wouldn't do that unless there was lighting provided on them. And
so is there any way of getting lighting on? Is that just impossible to go back on?
Chair, nothing is impossible. It takes resources and the will of council and funding to be able to implement significant improvements like that.
Okay, I think that's a concern we have with NCC paths too, that we hope to use. Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. I had mentioned earlier the fact that I'd like to see density distributed more evenly across the city. Obviously, residents in Kitchissippi have seen a lot of intensification over the course of the past 15 years. But one of the things that people ask me is why our LRT proximate and amenity proximate neighborhoods still get a higher share of the intensification. And I think this development is one of the ones that shows why. It's going to be very difficult for residents in this building to have a particularly good quality of life without driving. It's going to be extremely difficult to get to the metro without driving. It's going to be hard to get to school without driving. It's going to be hard to get to the library without driving. I am, whereas when we intensify in neighborhoods like those in Kitchissippi, you're much more able to walk, use public transit or active transportation in order to get around to the various different amenities and build true 15-minute communities. The question I have for staff is, are we down a path at all of sort of calculating the greenhouse gas impact of a development like this? I don't know if that's something that we're doing for each development now, but there's going to be a significant contribution by this development, if we approve it, to greenhouse gas emissions, because I cannot imagine that most trips won't be made by car for the folks who are living here.
Hello. Yes, Chair. We don't have an answer to that greenhouse gas calculation. There's work being done on high performance development standard where we may have more answers on those kinds of impacts, but we don't have that for this development.
Okay. I imagine I'm still going to vote in favor of this. I'm not going to say no to more housing, and the demand is going to be there. People are going to want to live here. But in order to make these communities livable, all the concerns that my colleagues have spoken about with respect to ensuring that there's the appropriate infrastructure to be able to support it are going to have to be addressed. That pathway is going to have to be winter maintained. There's going to have to be sidewalks along here. It's going to be difficult for folks. I don't want to say no to housing. And if you have a car, you'll be able to live here, and it's quite a nice neighborhood. And I imagine that having a diversity of people with various different profiles in the community will only make it a more attractive neighborhood in which to live. But I am concerned that without that infrastructure, we are continuing to add to our GHG inventory. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. I wonder how many car charging stations this place could have. That's going to be a consideration in the future, right? I mean, if within 10 years, we're expecting a lot of the cars on the market to be electric vehicles, situations like this, you need to be able to charge those vehicles in a building like this. Any other questions for staff? I don't see any. Did you want to make any closing comments? Oh, you have a motion. I forgot about your motion. You have a motion to change your to add your comments to the report, Councillor Gray.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, as councillors will remember, we deferred this. So, whereas, do I have to read all of them? Whereas the community consultation was actually held as a result of that deferral. Whereas the consultation produced additional important resident feedback, therefore it be resolved that the comments by the ward councillor in this section of the report, ACS 2022 PIEPS 0077, indicating the councillor is aware of the application related to this report, be amended as follows.
You don't have to, so it's up to you, Kathy, what you want to do. You can read these comments, or you can just summarize and make your closing argument against the application. I mean, they both achieve the same goal.
Yeah. Because these comments here, I mean, really are in fact quite a lot of what I would say in a closing argument. So I will read these, and then I will just add a couple of other small points. Community members have significant concerns about the rezoning application. The area has been zoned business park industrial for many years and reflects that zoning, given the neighboring industrial and business locations adjacent. The community feels that allowing residential zoning in the middle of an industrial zoning is poor planning. Community feels that this application is not thoughtful planning at all. The community feels that the traffic at the end of the road would only add to what is already considered a failed intersection, a highly congested school zone, and 2 dangerous traffic zones for residents, given the addition of 3 new apartment towers nearby on intersecting roads, also impacting the congested streets and failed intersection. Community members understand that the widening of March Road and the promised BRT are assumptions that may be much further away than 2038, as we've been given as an estimate. The community is supportive of increasing density, as demonstrated by the 4,000 plus units approved in Canada North since January this past year, including those from today's planning committee. However, overall planning and community design is not present here. The community feels that this is an example of poor planning and ill fit. In addition, there are significant trees that will be destroyed, suggested pathways to March Road that require trespassing on private property to get to. Finally, the neighboring industrial businesses were not consulted and have significant concerns regarding their heavy construction vehicles and noisy business activities that will have residents living within the industrial strip. So I'd like to add those comments. Is there a technical thing we have to vote to add it?
Carried.
No, we'll just carry them to add them.
Okay.
Yes.
So I made a lot of points there, but for those of you who are still thinking about this, and I appreciate some of the reasons why you think it's important to add additional housing, but in this particular area, this is one of the areas that has been impacted by the pretty significant flooding of the Beaver Pond and the Kissel Drain that will only create further problems. And the community, I think one of the main things they've made the case for is that this is premature. All of the reasons that so many of you made, that there aren't pathways, there isn't proximity to transit. It's based on tons of assumptions that are all premature, that we will have LRT stage 3, that we will have a widening of March Road, that we will have bus rapid transit, that we will look at those intersections. Those are all things that staff say may happen. If you look at the phrasing, they will be reviewed, or they may be, but they're not on it yet. And that's why this is, I think, completely premature. And I hear Councillor Menard saying maybe defer, but I'm not sure that I know how to phrase a motion that would say premature. Premature until all of the flooding issues are looked at, that there is no longer industrial and commercial beside these buildings, that there are all the money and infrastructure is put into just this area of Canada North, when in fact, what we could do is just vote against this as an option for residential use. I think I really want to stress the point that we have approved so many units in Canada North, and we don't argue against them for no reason. I think there are many, many reasons that the community has come out to talk about, and I think you yourselves have made, that indicate this is poor planning, premature planning, and should not go forward. So I really hope that I have your support in voting against this today.
All right. Thank you for those comments. We'll do yeas and nays. First on the motion from Councillor Curry, I believe people said carried, but just to do it formally.
Carried.
Thank you. And then on the item, we'll do yeas and nays.
Councillor Brockington,
Yes.
Councillor Cluche,
No.
Councillor Curry,
No.
Councillor Dudas,
No.
Councillor Hubley,
No.
Councillor Kitts,
No.
Councillor Leeper,
Yes.
Councillor Menard,
Yes.
Councillor Tierney,
No.
Councillor El Shantiri, Chair Moffat,
Yes.
and Chair Gower.
Yes.
5 yeas, 6 nays.
All right. Thank you. Well, so then you need to have a motion that recommends council refuses the application. Is that correct, Mr. Mark, who just appeared on screen?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will need, the committee will decide what it's going to do. The report having not been carried, council committee should indicate if it's recommending refusal of the item. And then between now and council, legal staff will work with Councillor Curry to develop a motion of reasons for refusal.
All right, so I'd recommend that we just do the same number, that the vote be that we refuse the application, and that it be on a 6-5 vote. You comfortable with that, Kelly? You comfortable with that, Mr. Mark?
I am.
Okay. So let that be recorded then, that it was a 6-5 vote that we refuse the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So that will rise to our next council meeting, which is next week. So we'll now, just conferring with Chair Gower, we have a few more things coming up after this item. So we will just take a break. Let's say it's 1:06 now. So why don't we come back at 1:30 and then we'll carry on the rest of the meeting. Everyone good with that?
Sounds great. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, I've not been following. Which item are you on next?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have my screen open.
5.1, 2021 Annual Development Report. And I think there's 3 or 4 others after that.
Thank you.